All right, Tim, we are live on YouTube and recording will be commencing in about a minute or so.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Lenny, for getting that set up. It's about 2 minutes to 4, and we're just waiting for the rest of the board members, applicants. Just a reminder, I'm sure everybody is aware, just keep yourselves on mute until you are ready to talk to the board or with the board, so that background noise, dogs, other various things that might pop up don't interrupt the meeting. Makes it easier for everybody to hear and understand what's going on. Once we have everybody here, we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll get started shortly. So until then, I'm just gonna mute myself.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Can anybody hear me?
Hear you, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Hey, we can. Great. First time I tried it, I was just a muted participant. The meeting would go a lot faster.
We're not going to say anything, Chris. We'll just let that one hang there.
All right.
Tim, do you have a quorum? You want me to start recording?
We do. We actually have 6. Who am I missing? Chris Carpus, Greg, Chris Campo, Carolyn Rogerson, Candy Pratt, Bill Bashane, Hart Weatherford. Hart did say that he may not make it. He had another meeting that he had to be in attendance at. So we do have a quorum. So Chris, Mr. Campo, if you would like to call the meeting to order, you are free to do so.
All righty. This is Chris Campo calling the meeting to order for the February 18th, 2021 Commercial Design Review Board. One thing I would like to do, I would ask the board if we could amend the agenda to move the, I don't see it on my agenda here. Hang on. Okay. I'd like to move 355. Yeah. The new business item, 355 Azalea Square Boulevard, which is just a shipping container. I think it should go pretty quickly. If other board members agree, could somebody make a motion?
Want to hear that first, Chris?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'd like to hear that first. Sorry.
We amend the agenda to move the new business item for 355 Azalea Square Boulevard to the first thing that we handle prior to signs and old business. Well, there are no signs. So prior to old business, is that what you're looking for?
Yes. Correct.
All right. That's my motion.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you, Candy and Bill. All in favor, please say aye. Candy?
Aye.
And just a reminder, we're going to do the roll call votes for this meeting. Bill?
Aye.
Chris Carpus?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Carolyn?
Carolyn? Carolyn, can you hear us?
Carolyn,
Carolyn, can you hear us?
is your speaker on, Carolyn?
All right, I think she'll join us shortly.
Okay.
Can I go ahead and call for the vote? Well, that I did, I guess. Okay, Candy, Bill, Chris, Greg, and I'm in favor. And Carolyn is, what, abstain?
We'll call it abstain.
All right. Okay. All right, let's move. Thank you for that.
Chris, at
Yep,
this
I passed.
time, can I also make certain that I am recused for old business item number 1? I did email Tim that information.
Somerville
Yes, sir.
Charter School. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so one thing we do have to do is approve or amend the minutes from last month's meeting. Would someone like to make a motion for approval to the minutes?
Make a motion, we approve.
Can we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Was that Chris
Second,
Carpus?
second, yes, sir. All in favor of approving the minutes? Candy?
If you would just show I was not present, I can't vote on those minutes.
Gotcha. Okay. Bill?
Aye.
Chris Carpus?
Aye.
Greg Soika?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
All right. And I'm approved as well. Okay. So appreciate that. That being said, the first order of business is Azalea Square Boulevard, assuming the applicant is present.
Yes, I am on.
Okay. I think Tim will give a brief introduction, and then you are encouraged to tell us what you would like to do.
Thanks,
All right,
Chris.
Tim, the floor is yours. Yep.
This is a request for final approval to allow a shipping container to be placed on the property for a year. This is over at the Dick's Sporting Goods at 3555 Azalea Square Boulevard. This is the first meeting. I provided the section that gives the design review board the authority to approve this for a temporary time frame, and did want to point out that this is consistent with other locations that have requested the use of storage containers within the town, and the board has approved in the past for 1 year at a time with extensions requiring further DRB approval. Pretty straightforward. This is the back of the Dick's Sporting Goods. They're planning to tuck it here in this red circle. I did pull some street views. This is the zoning. This is an aerial photo. Old Light Road. This is Azalea Square Boulevard coming through. It's right in the back behind the store. A little bit closer. This is where it would be located based on the information provided. And the last item was this is the view from Old Light Road. It would allow for, it's pretty well screened back there, to tell the truth. So I will hand this over to the applicant and allow them to address any other items concerning this.
So my name's Casey. I'm the store manager for Dick's Sporting Goods in Somerville. And I'm just asking for a little bit of support as we go into our boat season. I don't know how many of y'all kayak or if y'all been to a Dick's Sporting Goods, but kayaks, treadmills, they all take up a lot of space. A lot of our other buildings have multiple trailers. I just need one to help me get through this year with all the sales that we've got going on as fitness picks up and everything. We're also doing some remodeling on the inside of the building. That's going to take up a little bit more space this year than in previous years. So that's really what we need it for, is just a little added space for the next year to get us through and help us with our sales.
All right. Thank you, Casey. Is there anyone on the board that is opposed to this that would like to speak first? If not, could we have a motion for approval, please?
I would move for the approval of the request for 355 Azalea Square Boulevard to put a shipping container in place with a time limitation of 1 year.
Very good. Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. Then calling the roll, I'm in favor. Carolyn?
Yes.
Yes. Greg?
I'm not exactly sure about protocol because I know there's a motion and I'm not really big on or that knowledgeable, but I did want to make a couple comments if it's not too late. I support.
Yeah, it is, and
it is
I
too
apologize.
late.
Just no. I said I apologize. I should have asked for discussion, and I simply forgot. So let's just go ahead and discuss it.
Okay, so I have no objections. However, the devil's in the details. So we're thinking, it's a nice shipping container, not one that's been beat to death and is all rusted, and that it's installed level and not following the slope of a unusual pitch, and that it's either parallel or perpendicular to the building and not just haphazardly dumped there. So Dick's is a quality organization. I shop there all the time, and we're all going to be buying kayaks if it doesn't stop raining. So we need that shipping container. And again, as long as it's installed consistent with the quality of enterprise that Dick's represents, I fully support it.
Greg, why don't you amend the motion to include that in your motion? That would be great.
Okay. Again, I'm not that
Just ask for
experienced
permission
in
to
these
amend.
rules of meetings, but I guess I would ask that the motion be amended to include a reasonable new condition, not new, but reasonably new, relatively new shipping container installed reasonably level and more or less parallel and perpendicular to the building facades.
Okay, and I, as the person that made the first motion, accept that, and the second needs to accept that. Who was our second? Carolyn?
Carolyn.
I second the amendment to the motion.
Okay.
Okay. So all right. So Carolyn has already approved. I've approved, or I approve again if I need to. Greg, your vote?
Approve.
All right. Mr. Karpus?
Yes. Approve.
Bill?
Yes.
And Candy?
Yes.
Okay. There you go. Ms. Casey, you have approval, and thank you for coming, and good luck.
Thank you very much, y'all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You too. All righty. The next applicant is the Somerville Charter School. They're requesting preliminary and final approval. Again, Tim, if you could get us started.
Just a second. Let me get there. This is an application for preliminary and final approval of a proposed 42,900 square foot educational campus on 9.42 acres located at 1899 Baconsbridge Road. This was previously heard at the Design Review Board in December of 2020 for conceptual review, and in January of 2021, the requested preliminary approval was denied. So, to address staff comments, the parking exceeds the permitted 200% of the maximum requirement. They have provided the parking justification letter, and staff has approved the parking overage in compliance with the town's requirements, including pervious pavement or pavers. The building is proposed to be constructed with tilt-up concrete panels. The DRB is required to approve this style because it was denied last time. We still need to address that per section 4.7.2D. The design guidelines, all of Chapter 4, sections 8.4 through 8.6 of the landscaping section in Chapter 10 are all within the discretion of the Design Review Board to waive if the board agrees that the intent of the ordinance is being met. The applicant has revised the drawings to address most of the board's comments from preliminary review. There was some engineering comments. Staff is concerned with vehicular ingress-egress during drop-off and pickup times, especially with the left turns to and from the site. The applicant is responsible for ensuring the recommendations of the TIA are addressed, and pedestrian connections to the site are required from the multi-use path along Baconsbridge and Sawmill Branch Trail. A crosswalk on Baconsbridge Road is not allowed by the DOT, so the trail connection would accommodate walkers, bikers accessing the site from the opposite side of the road. Those were engineering comments concerning that. I will get down to the site plan, and I will turn it over to the applicant to address the changes that have been made since this was last seen by the board.
Thank you, Tim. This is Casey Warfield with Kimley Horn Associates, Site Civil, representing the owner and applicant. Appreciate the board's time this afternoon. As Tim mentioned, we have made some adjustments on the building and site. Site is largely the same, with the exception of a few things that we discussed last time and in coordination with the town and the TIA recommendations. One thing I wanted to bring up to the board that we would request, and obviously at the board's discretion, is a lot of discussion in the past has been related to the building and materials and those sorts of things. And if it's at the board's discretion, but if they're okay with it, we would request that if there's still continued concerns with the building facades and materials and aesthetics of it, it potentially split the site approval from a building approval, as that would help us progress the project forward as we work through those final building items. So I did want to mention that before we got started. And but diving into the site, the items that have changed are we do have a sidewalk connection to the Sawmill Branch multi-use trail that provides the connectivity to the opposite side of Sawmill Branch through the underpass, Baconsbridge Road. And it also gives us better access to the neighborhoods on either side of the road, and allows children to bike in a safe or potentially walk in a safe manner to the school. A few other items that we've adjusted and addressed based on board's comments are one of the things that was mentioned is the dumpster location, and confirming the truck turn movements on that. We did reanalyze that and confirm that the dumpster movement does work with the dumpsters at the angles that they're currently shown. Added in and called out the fences around the stormwater ponds, help with the safety in those particular areas. And I'll mention briefly on the landscape front, we made some adjustments there in rescaling and sizing the trees as they relate to understory and overstory to better accurately represent the sizes of those on the plans, and provided some additional enhancements for the landscaping around the building entrance itself to help upgrade that particular area. One of the items that engineering mentioned was the concerns with access to into the site, and we're working with staff to address those concerns as well as SCDOT, and intend to abide by the TIA recommendations as we continue to work with staff on that aspect. Really not much else new with the site. Obviously, if there's any questions, we're happy to help answer those.
I had a question about the site, and I did not mention this last time. I'm not sure why, but when you enter, this is about the road configuration, and I know it's a very tight site and you have a lot of queuing issues at a school, but when you come in and you turn, I guess that's clockwise, and then start going around your retention or detention, I always get those wrong. And then you come out of that, and it looks like then it's a pretty straight shot. And I don't know where the contours are, but it seems like there's some site where the utility easement takes a 135-degree angle, but the road doesn't really follow that utility easement. And I was wondering if, and I can't really point to the screen, maybe Tim, right there, go back, right in there. That seems like a part of the site where the road and the drive might be a little more pleasant if the road kind of were able to be curved at that area instead of a straightaway. Did you look at that at all, or?
We did, and what's hard to see on this drawing, and you can kind of see it if you zoom in, is the floodway from Sawmill Branch Creek is just about a foot or so off the back of curb.
Okay.
So we were basically hugging that floodway line
so you're really
as close as we can.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good reason, because it just seemed like if you could go out and follow that. Is SS storm sewer?
That's a sanitary sewer.
Sanitary sewer, yeah. It's kind of too bad you couldn't kind of follow that path a little bit, but if you're hemmed in, there's not a lot you can do. We don't want people driving in the floodway, I guess.
Are there any other site comments from the board? I've got a couple. The landscape plan is better than it was. It's got more planting right at the entrance. There's also, and Tim, I'm looking on sheet L2.2-01. There also appears to be a detention basin right near the front door. No, Tim, up a little bit. Up in the plus, follow that pipe right there. Yep. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's not a detention basin, but just a yard inlet with the site grading and drainage, and it lent itself and needed a low point in that area, and so that's just a yard inlet that we're using also to connect the two stormwater ponds. So ponds are interconnected, and that's just a at grade grade inlet in that area.
Okay, just a low depressed area to grade, but it's not really retaining anything.
No, the intent is for for that to the sheet flow to that inlet and then enter the storm system and the ponds.
Okay.
No pond.
And it's, gotcha. And what is just north of that by 10 feet or so? Looks like
Just
bike
north of
racks
that,
or something.
bike racks. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And walk us through the 3 dots and the Spirit Rock.
Yeah. So the 3 dots are flagpoles. So we've got the three flagpoles there, which is typical that the school likes to have the 3. And then the Spirit Rock is something that the school has found to be successful at some of their other facilities, and gives the students a kind of sense of pride and things throughout the year, that they'll paint it different colors for different times of the year or different seasons and other activities that they have going on in the school, that they've found that the students like it, and so they wanted to incorporate that into the entrance and the facade as well.
All right. All righty. And just more specifics on the landscape plan in the parking lot. And Tim, I'm going to the next sheet, maybe. L2.04. The front buffer, Casey, is pretty non-existent. Specifically on L204, the front buffer is pretty non-existent. The tree selected is a Bosque elm, which is very narrow. The tree on the other side is a white oak, that's fine. And then the shrub is a dwarf Burford holly, which dwarf is kind of a misnomer because they can get, I don't know, 15 feet tall. So, you know, I feel like the planting plan needs a little help. It doesn't really feel like it was designed. It feels like it was just, you know, kind of placed a hedge in there. And the other thing is, closer to the building in the fire lane, those Burford hollies, it's a thorny plant. And it's also going to block visibility for cars coming out of that parking lot. I think the landscape plan needs to be a little more thought through. I think that, say, the driver loop there, it would be good to have trees on both sides of the road, both sides of that loop. I'm talking specifically on the right-hand side or the south side, I guess, so that cars feel like they're going through a little bit of an alley, and it's, you know, people are waiting in their cars like you do at a normal school. You're just going to be baking in the sun in that little parking lot, and it would be nice if that was a you know, a shaded drive to drive through. Doesn't have to be crazy. It can be done with pine trees or something. And another thought is, I think we're kind of missing an opportunity to really design a park space between this driver loop and the Sawmill Branch Canal. That could really be a great looking space instead of kind of this no man's land right now. So I would like to see, and Tim, if you move your hand over from that curb to the trail, that's kind of where I'm talking about. Right through there could be a very pleasant space in there. I'd like you to consider that. So again, just kind of a recap, it's more enhanced buffer planting to screen the driveway so we don't see it as prominently. It can be a filtered view. And keep in mind, you're at a higher elevation, I believe, on Bacon's Ridge Road than this site is, even when you're done. So just, you know, just a plan that's more, I don't even really know how to say it, but more designed and less just regimented with trees every 30 feet. You know, I think one thing we're missing is kind of almost interpreting the history of this land and what it could be. You know, I know now it's just kind of been vacant for as long as I can remember. but it actually could be a pretty special site if done well. And I think the landscape has got a long way to go. So I'd like you to consider that. And then I'm not sure what sheet, but I can just tell you, I think the buffer planting on the left-hand side of the building is pretty substandard, because I think it will be visible, at least the front quarter or something like that. So we really need to study that area and see, an appropriate amount of landscaping in there. Just generally more variety. I think need to relook at the plant types that were used, because this is, I don't know if it's in the floodway or whatever, but certainly the portions of it are, and I would assume the soils are pretty clayey. So just need to verify that, and if they are clayey, then select some materials that are appropriately suited. And there's also a big push these days to use longleaf pine because they do well in this soil condition, and that's the foresters around here are kind of really stressing the importance of introducing those back. So I think the planting may be a good start, but it's got a ways to go for me. Any other comments on site from the board?
Is there any verification that the landscape around the perimeter of the site, does that meet the UDO?
Had to unmute myself. Generally, yes. With the UDO, the biggest issue is providing 8 feet of landscaping around parking lots and your drive aisles visible. So, I mean, generally speaking, and it's not a heavy planting requirement along this edge. So what's visible from Bacon's Bridge, there's more than 8 feet along here that's been landscaped. You have it on both sides of this drive. You have landscaping, on the back side of the parking lot here. So, and remember, this is GB zoning, so it's not like the UCMX, which would push parking to the back or anything along those lines. It's adjacent to other business, so there isn't a specific buffer requirement along the side here. But yes, they are meeting those requirements.
And this is Casey again. One thing I will mention, Chris, to follow up on your question or request for the trees on both sides of our drop off and pickup loop. We are providing that where we can. There is a section that is missing adjacent kind of to the eastern or stormwater pond on the right side of the page, and that is due to the road butting up against the sanitary sewer easement, and we're limited in being able to plant anything in that easement. So that's part of what's kind of driving that in that particular area.
Okay, and if you could, you may be able to push the road over slightly to accommodate that. And while I have you, Casey, what is the reasoning for having all those trees in the back left, almost like you're recreating a forest instead of kind of maybe having some, but dispersing that throughout the site?
It's so part of the reasoning in planting those back is the UDO has a pretty hefty landscaping tree density on the site, and one of the concerns that was expressed previously to us is the amount of trees that we're clearing on site and trying to plant back as much as we could and can. So that's one of the main reasons that we're replanting in that area. We're basically cutting it down to meet flood ordinance requirements for no net fill, and so trying to replant that back and get it back to a more forested condition in the post-developed. And then one of the things that was kind of limiting our in the layout was some minimum spacing requirements of the trees. And so, we can go back and add, additional density in trees. And it sounds like it's at the board's discretion that, and really request that we densify those trees, spread them out elsewhere in site, and maybe we don't necessarily meet those minimum spacing requirements. Still want to use good standard practice and not so close together that they won't grow and thrive in the future. But that's part of what's driving that quantity of trees.
Okay, well, I would support designing it first and then seeing what the minimum spacing requirements are. And of course, try to meet if you can, but if you have a good reason that it's better not to, I'm open to that idea. And I would support moving some of those trees elsewhere if needed, or because I think the buffer along the front needs quite a bit of enhancement. Were there any other site comments? I thought I heard someone trying to get on earlier.
And one thing I'll mention on that,
as far as the front, as far as the area on the front to the right of the entrance, I think one of the reasons, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there is a wetland there that we're trying to stay out of based on the Army Corps of Engineers request, right?
Yes, yeah. So there are wetlands along Bacon's Bridge Road frontage, which is also dictating what we can and can't do in that area. And so we need to stay out of the wetlands themselves, but maybe in the town's 25-foot wetland buffer that we can do some additional plantings in that to help enhance that buffer.
Alrighty, looks like that's primarily on the left-hand side more than the right, but all right. There being no other comments on site, Casey, do you have someone that's going to present architecture?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Tyler with Bryan Companies. Before we get into architecture real quick, I just wanted to point out we did submit the drawings with a brick, real brick. Unfortunately, when we got all the pricing back, it was our intent to try to meet the comments of the DRB board meetings from the past. But once we get the cost back, it created a very high cost and made this project unfeasible going with the brick. So our intention is to still move forward with the tilt panel embossed brick design that we were originally going for. So I just wanted to make that clear, but I think in general, with all the other comments that were presented to us, I think we really created a great design. Took everybody's comments into account and came up with this. So I'll hand it off.
So how are those comments achieved? If you could walk us through design intent and how does it tie into Somerville? How does it kind of meet ordinance? What's from a designer standpoint? How did you achieve those goals?
And Steve and Rick, are you on?
Yeah, we're on. I think what we did is we took the UDO and went through it item by item and applied those items to the design of the building.
Somerville DRB meeting.
In our comment letter that we supplied in this resubmittal, I think we addressed all those comments both verbally and also with pictures in those comments.
Alrighty, turn it over for the board to comment. I'd like to start with the architects on this. Chris or Greg, would you like to go first?
Chris, do you want to start it off?
Sure.
Then I'll have less to say.
Okay.
Probably have similar comments.
Is there any part of this that will remain real brick, including the water table?
No.
So
No, this is Max. Tim, I don't know if you can show the pictures that I sent you, but one of the things in general that I wanted to make a comment is this is a small charter school. Their budget is very limited, and they get these are public funds that are being used. And I was just at a ground opening for another of their schools, and we're building a high school portion as a continuation segue for their middle school and their elementary school. And I was able to actually take these pictures. I just took them on Tuesday. This is the school that we built 7 years ago. And whether, when you're 20 feet away and beyond, there's really, you cannot tell the difference whether it is an embossed or if it is a real brick. I took some close-ups, some in different angles, and we just don't feel like those $230-some thousand that is going to cost us to put the real bricks, that it's money well spent just to put bricks around the building that already looks like there is a bricks. And we feel like that money better spent to the education of the children, to make them a different project for the children, rather than putting bricks around a building that already looks like has bricks on it. So it would be an additional money spent towards this building that we don't feel needs it.
Okay. Well, so let me ask you, how will you achieve the water table? I think in the UDO, it's supposed to protrude from the field, the face of the building. How do you plan on achieving that with embossed brick?
I'm going to ask Tyler, who knows more about construction, our architects, is there a way to achieve that with the tilt panels?
It would have to be something applied. It wouldn't, the tilt panel itself is not going to allow us to have that type of a shape at the top, but we could possibly apply some kind of a trim piece or something that would give us some type of a ledge there at the top of the water table.
I think in one of these pictures you do have up, it has the water table. I know it kind of has that one there. And then I think one of the first ones you opened up had it in the back there, right there. And then there would just be brick below the water table.
Oh, I see.
That's how we would achieve it. Yep.
So reverse that per picture on the left, basically.
Right.
The bricks on the bottom, yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm certainly not here to make intentionally make buildings more expensive or make them make suggestions that are cost prohibitive outside of what is required by the town of Somerville. One of the issues I have with just straight up using embossed brick is, and to some extent tilt up concrete, although tilt up is approved, I believe, it's a lack of three-dimensional detail. And even in that picture that's up right now, you would expect a pilaster to protrude from the brick, or if it's a recess, that it's recessed from the face of the brick. And I don't know if that kind of thing is achieved with the embossed brick, but I think the flatness, the challenge of the way that the building is going to go together is that it's just really difficult to have three-dimensional relief given the choice of materials. And so, and that being said, I do think the brick is an issue. I don't know if it's a hill that I would die on, but the color and a sample panel and all that, I think would definitely be in order. The other issue, I was going to bring up the siding, but I'm thinking that, we typically approve cementitious fiber. And I mean, this is just straight up concrete. And so I'm not sure that it's that far off necessarily. So I may not have too much of an issue for that. But Tim, if you go to the overall elevations, there's quite a rhythm established here that it's kind of strip mall looking. I'm not sure if, I mean, it's very, very regular. I know we've got three windows and one section's on the left. And I get what you're doing there. And I'm not necessarily sure how else you would do that and that, to break up that elevation. But I would have a little bit of concern about the regularity of that rhythm along that side. That's the would be on that little key plan there. That's the top elevation, right? So that's the left side of the building if you're on the street, right?
The pool store side.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I have more of an issue with that elevation than I do the front. I think that what you've done with varying the heights of the parapet wall looks good, much better, and appreciate that you did look at that, and even on the side where the drive-through drop-off is, I think looks better. I'm not sure this would be a great what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know that I would want to establish a precedence for this type of look or design or construction in Somerville, but I'm interested to hear what everybody else has to say too. But I do think it's better than it was, but I still have some issues with the embossed brick and the left side to some extent.
Greg?
Sure, and I was right that Chris did pick up on a few things I was going to say, so I'm going to try to not repeat them. But the first thing I'd like to suggest is that I believe the application was calling for preliminary and final approval at this meeting. Is that correct, Tim?
That's correct. They did request both.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not feeling the love for that as a concept. Preliminary, probably, with some caveats, but final, I don't think this is final. But preliminary, I'm saying yes, because, you know, I think you guys went back and listened to us and came back with some significant improvements over what was provided before. And, you know, I greatly appreciate that. The windows look 100% better. The stepping up and down of the facade is 100% better. So those are all very positive. And the reason I'm saying not final, I'm like, gee, if you did that much improvement in a month, imagine what you could do in another month. And what Casey said, you know, is it possible to approve some components, the longer lead of site design, so that is so to not delay your process? You know, does that help you at all? It may or may not, I don't know. But, you know, I'm thinking maybe that's a workaround to buy you some time to improve the design without delaying the project. So those are just a couple ideas. No final. The comment I made last time, and I'd have to check the meetings to see if I really articulated what I was trying to say, but what I was trying to suggest was, rather than put, you know, spread money around the perimeter with embossed brick, to put more of it or less of it, but real brick at the front door, because that's really what we're trying to do, is say, here's the front door, here's the front sign. You walk past the spirit rock and the flagpoles and you see this really nice piece of the building. So, rather than spread your limited funds across a fairly large building, simplify as much of the building as you can and really put that money up at the front door. Now, I may not have said that in as many words last time, but that's what I was trying to articulate. And sometimes I think I'm really clear and I realize I'm not, but that's what I was trying to say last time is, can you simplify and put real brick in a small area up front so that, that's the feely touch, that's a pedestrian experience, that's a first-time visitor, to create a really good impression, just like you do at home. We have a very simple house in Somerville, but the front door is really nice, and I like to think that's what people, remember. The other thing I'd like to touch on is, please don't use, well, UDO made us do this. In the end, I think we're all thinking that UDO is a guideline. It's not saying you can't depart from it. If you're looking at your design and saying, I can make this really nice, but the UDO has my hands tied behind my back, so I can't, don't do that. Just say, hey, you know what? The UDO is really hurting this building. And do you really want a bad building and us to follow UDO? Or can we let us deviate from UDO so the building can be really nice? And I think this is the second meeting where we've had, well, we can't do it because of UDO. That is not the intent. The UDO is meant to give overarching guidance, but it's not going to be, oh, you didn't pass this paragraph of UDO, fail. That is clearly not the intent of any kind of design guideline. The last thing I wanted to say, well, two more things. When you show photos from other projects, last meeting and this meeting, they look significantly better than what you're proposing to do on this project. So if you show photos, it should be of the intent of, we're going to do this and better, not here's a really nice building we did in the past, but you're really not going to get that. You're going to get this over here. I think there has to be an alignment. Show the photo. If the photo's good, let's build it so it looks like the photo. And I'm not seeing, even in the photos you showed this week, I'd say, that building was pretty nice. And I look at this and I'm saying, I'm just not seeing it. I'm just not seeing as nice of a building as in the pictures. And then the last thing I want to react to, and this I feel very, very strongly about, that, there is an issue of money, and do you spend money on the building or on the kids? And we grew up in a very modest circumstance, and we had a beautiful school. And there were other kids at other schools who had more money, but their school wasn't as nice. And that was always a real sense of pride for me and my family and my friends, because we had like a really nice school. We didn't have any money, but we had a great school. And I just think that where you send a kid to school gives that kid like an image of who they are in the world, who they are in society. And when you go around Somerville and Dorchester County, and you look at the new Rawlings, the newish DuBose, the new Alston Bailey, I think those kids go there from a variety of income levels and a variety of circumstances at home. But when they get there, they feel like, hey, you know what? I may not have much at home, but this is a really nice school. And it's not income adjusted. It's like there's a quality level that we owe our kids. And yes, you need money for technology, you need money for instruction, but what we're giving them as a school really has, I believe, a long-lasting impact on how they view themselves in the world. And I realize you're on a tight budget, but these kids need to feel proud of where they go to school. And I think a lot of that could be achieved if you tried to pick one or two areas and said, instead of spending my money, equally around the perimeter, take those resources and focus it on maybe an exterior area and maybe part of the interior, and maybe everything is pretty plain, and say, well, everything's pretty plain, but this is really great. This front door is great. This library is great. The classrooms are pretty simple and blah, 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 but it's memorable for those kids. So that's a soapbox. I'm sorry, but it's something that I thank God every day that I grew up in the circumstance I did, and to understand what to work hard for, and to feel that I was treated, that the environment around me did not reflect the economic circumstance of my family.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Can I follow up with a couple items, a couple things?
Sure.
Thank you. The pictures that we showed today that you say it's nice, that's what we want to do here. Those are the pictures. Believe it or not, that school is 7 years old, and still the bricks look just like the bricks. They haven't been repainted since. They haven't been touched since. So they look like the real thing. And if you like them, that's exactly what we were trying to replicate here. As far as the bricks, the facade with the tilt panels that look like bricks, like the pictures, that's just the actual form that they're poured. So whether we pour it to look like concrete or we pour it to look like the bricks, there's no cost difference. The actual cost difference is on the real bricks. But as far as the budget, I appreciate your comment, Greg. This is all public money. This is a public school. Charter schools are public schools and they're free to the public, and the money that they use is from the public. And so if any of you has any pulls with the school board and say, hey, please give more money to them because they want to put, whether it's bricks, whether it's windows, whether it's whatever it is, and we have more money in the budget to spend. But there is only so much that they're allowed, and typically is based on the number of students that it's capped at. So if this school has 765 students, I believe that's the number, then that's what their budget is limited to. But I do appreciate the comment. I wish that we had more available, that we could do anything we want to. But unfortunately, I'm not the operator. But we've built about 40 schools for them now, so we kind of know how the drill goes. But I do appreciate your comments, Greg. Thank you.
Just a couple of comments real quick. I understand public money and I get that, and I'm a huge advocate of that as well. But you're sinking a lot of money into a site because there's a lot of site issues. And those site issues are never going to be seen. Never going to be seen. I mean, they'll realize that when their school doesn't flood, but there's so much going into the site. And then when you get to the finishes, and this isn't just on this project, it's on a lot of projects, spend so much in the site or getting the soil right and all that kind of stuff. Then when you get to the finishes that everybody will see for the next 50 years, you skimp out on the finishes, and that's just wrong. It's just not the right approach. And the second thing is, I'm looking at Rollins Elementary, public money, Alston Bailey that Greg mentioned, public money. We owe it to the public to do better. I'd like to see one thing on this building that is, by God, we might have had to be cost effective somewhere else, but we got this part right. And I'm just not seeing it. And we have consistently said, look at Rollins. We've consistently said that the fake brick doesn't work for us. I don't know how many different ways we can say that, but apologize for my little bit of a rant there, but I guess that's the last couple things I have to say about it. I'm going to ask other board members for comments. Bill.
I would focus on
Bill, do you have any comments?
Hello, this is Bill. Hello.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would focus on the two elevations that are visible from the road, which are the south elevation and the west elevation. That would be the front and the right elevations. The other two elevations are going to be very difficult to ever see from anywhere. Even if you're driving through the driveway, you're going to be so close to them, you're not going to see much. But I think the shape of the front looks good, the form of it. The form of the right-hand elevation, I think, looks good. And maybe you do a combination of the stamp brick with the tilt wall, but get some real brick on your major entry features on the front, I don't think you need much more brick on the right. I don't think you need as much on the left and rear. But anyway, those are the comments. I think you got the form and the shape of the building pretty good at this point.
Well, I'm not sure which elevation you were looking at, because I can't read where it says north, south, east, or west. Is it the first, second, third, or fourth elevation? Can you do it like that and tell me?
It'd be the third and fourth.
Okay.
The bottom elevation is the front, and the next one up the sheet is the right.
Okay, good. That's great.
The other two you can't see anywhere. So you got the canopy, you know, on the right elevation. You got the entry canopy on the front. Maybe you accentuate the entry going into the gymnasium a little more.
And I kind of agree with Bill on that, is using the real brick around the front, and also Greg, who mentioned the real brick around the door, and eliminate that monotonous long side with the fake brick on it, and do it just the tilt up concrete, maybe even. I don't know if it's not going to be seen that much. I don't know why it would be that important, but I don't like the look of that that side of the building. So I agree with y'all on that.
And Art Hart has not joined us, correct, Tim?
No, I don't see him here on the list.
Alrighty. Any other comments from the board?
I think I'll let them blow and go on the site work, though. I think that, you know, I think they're in good shape on site work.
Well, I think, and Tim, this is really a question for you probably, is that I think they can do an early site package or whatever. So they theoretically could get, say, site approval to some level, correct? Even if it's just preliminary?
Typically the way that, and I think I saw Bonnie on here. Yeah, Bonnie is sitting in the meeting. I don't know if she is actually listening, but we don't typically start our full review until we have final approval on the project. So as far as early site packages go, I'm not sure exactly where those come into the process. I rarely deal with them directly. So unless Matt Halter or Bonnie Miley are able to answer that question real quick, I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure we need the full final on the site to be able to move it forward. But in the past, we have separated building and site, or asked them to come back with landscaping for another review. So it's not unheard of to separate out the elements of the project to potentially allow them to move forward with an aspect of it that is at the final level, if you believe that's the case. So truthfully, you know, it's kind of my position. I thought that the site, that aspect of it was in good shape. I knew that there was going to be extensive discussion concerning the building, and you guys didn't disappoint. And what it boils down to is, you know, maybe you can give preliminary and final approval to the site, and maybe just preliminary approval on the building, and ask them to come back for final on the building to address some of these outstanding concerns that are still floating out there.
Hey, Tim, this is Matt. I'm actually
ahead,
on Wendy's name, but I would be fine with them submitting like an early site package if you guys approve of the site. at least starting to take a look at it and give them some comments.
Matt, is preliminary approval enough for you to consider reviewing the early site package?
Yeah, they could go ahead and submit with that. I think that'd be fine.
Alrighty.
We obviously couldn't give any approvals until you guys give approval on the whole project, but we can start taking a look at it.
Yeah, and that'll accelerate their schedule. So, all right, I think what the board is leaning towards is a preliminary approval. Maybe, I don't know if it's preliminary approval with conditions necessarily. That's up for you all to decide, but it could be just a preliminary approval. And that would mean that they could accelerate their schedule a little bit, but they would still have to come back to us and address the comments we've made. So is there someone on the board that would like to make a motion of some kind?
Well, it's just a question of, Chris, for me, do we want to be specific with the motion of exactly what we're asking? Because I think I keep hearing repeating themes or the same theme repeated strongly by one person. I think it's landscaping, where to put the plants and what type of plants, what to do with the front door, and to ease off on the UDO requirements and have the architects go back and say, let's make this thing look as good as we can. And if there's a UDO issue, call Tim. Say, hey, Tim, we have this really nice way to make this better, but we need to kind of ignore the UDO on these couple of principles. What do you think?
And Greg, that's exactly what you guys have the right to do. If there's something specifically within the section, the scale and height, you do have the ability to waive, the minimum 22 foot or whatever that is, and allow them to bring that down further. If we still feel that this height is out of scale with what it needs to be.
All I'm asking for is in the final meeting, I don't want to hear the word UDO. I want the architects to say, this building's beautiful. And it may not be the most beautiful school in the world, but based on our site constraints and our building budget, this is the best looking building we can make. And you need to say that. You need to
I think we're there, Greg. I think we were totally there. We came up with a beautiful design based on some of the comments that we've had over the last meetings. So I think we've established that, and we keep, over the last couple of meetings, we've kept hearing that we need to address the UDO, and we have to address the UDO, and we have to comment to that. So we came up with, these comments based on the UDO, and in some cases we're following it, in some cases we're not. You allowed us to drop the walls of the building, which was a huge thing for the looks of the building. So that was a big plus for us. And we went all the way around the building with a brick, but then we can't afford it. So now we have the faux brick. Right. I think the street view of this building, whether it's faux brick or real brick, is a positive thing. I think this building will look fantastic.
All right, but you've heard again for I believe the second time, we think the front entrance is still not. It's not significant enough. And I think Chris Karpus, and I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to anyhow, Chris Karpus mentioned strip mall. And this is not a strip mall. This is a school.
But he mentioned that on the side of the building that nobody can see, that nobody seems to care about. So that's where that comment came from. The two sides of the building that are street facing, I think everybody likes.
I'm not going to speak for. I'm not going to speak for anybody else on the board. I'll tell you that I do not think that front door has the presence and impact that a school in Dorchester County needs.
I would agree. We need to close the presentation aspect and just have board discussion now. And Greg, I think if we were consistent with what we've done in the past, you were kind of restating what people had said. I think you were just about at a motion. In the past, we would have said, all right, well, let's just call that your motion. But just to be very clear, if you are comfortable doing it, if someone else wants to, that's fine. But to be very clear, I think we need a motion. I've already called for the motion, actually. So we need to have a motion. Or if we don't have a motion, then this project, I guess, would be, Tim, deferred, or we would not act on it or something.
We don't want it. We don't want to do that. We want to move the project forward. So I'll make a motion that we provide preliminary approval, expecting the final presentation, which I assume will be next month, will address the comments we've had on the planting, specifically spreading the dense planting in the back to try and get it more up front and more in the public view, to reconsider again the front door. And by the front door, I'm not talking about the piece that you actually pull open and walk through, but rather the walkway, entire sort of pedestrian experience from leaving the parking lot and entering the building, and what that looks like. And please don't come back the next meeting complaining about UDO. Those are the three things that I've now, if there's other things, we can add them in there, but those are the three things that I would like to have contingent upon the preliminary approval.
I would say just to give a little more clarity to your front door comment, I think you are saying you want to, the areas of that front door experience need to be enhanced, probably with real brick, even if it's thin brick, and that would be consistent with what I have said, you have said, Mr. Carpus has said, and Bill. I can't remember if Carolyn has said that as well. So are you, just for clarity's sake, are you saying that they need to look at using real brick, even if it's thin brick, along these entry elements?
I guess what I'm saying, Chris, is to me, it's less of an issue of quote unquote real brick versus pressed brick. It is the entire sort of entry facade. Now, would I prefer thin brick, real brick? Absolutely. There was mention last meeting of a mock-up that was at City Hall or Town Hall or somewhere. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sitting in my office on the floor. So if you have time during regular business hours, you're more than welcome to go to the Planning and Zoning office and see the sample that was provided. Don't recommend trying to pick it up, though.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying yes or no to the embossed. I think if you came back with thin, there's absolutely, there's no reason we wouldn't approve it. I'm not saying we would reject embossed unless, we can see it. You got to see it and say, well, is that good? So that's not really a motion anymore.
Okay. Well, you made a motion at the beginning.
Yeah.
Chris.
Now, is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to throw something out there. I think part of why that left side looks kind of like a strip mall is because of the rhythm that's been established with the different materials. If we're if we're looking at the idea of trying to enhance the front door of this building, the front of the building, the entrance, the experience from the parking lot and the drop off to the front, why not consider evaluating the use of the embossed brick? Take that minimize it on the side and the back, and maximize it on the front in the form of thin brick or real brick. And that way you're cutting down on the amount of brick, whether embossed or real, but you're putting the money up front into using an actual clay product, and then possibly downplaying the use of it on the side and the back where the experience is a little bit less. What do you think about that?
I think I would agree. I think that's what Bill said as well. You know, something very, very similar.
Well,
and I'm looking again.
I don't know that I can ever really totally agree with Bill, though. We just have that kind of relationship. No, I think it's a good idea to you know, to put that effort into the front. And actually, I'm telling you, if you made all that left side all the same material, but keep the offsets and the height variations in the parapet, it would look less like a strip mall on the side of the building and more like the side of a building.
I agree. And one other thing I would kind of add to that is what's making it look strip mallish is it's got this, every other panel is like A is concrete, B is embossed brick, A is concrete, B is embossed brick. You know, it's alternating with, again, I'm looking at Rollins, and what they have is a complete bay that's 4 windows wide. That's all brick. And then they have a bay that's 5 or 6 windows wide, and that's all some other masonry material or concrete. I can't really tell from here. But again, it's that rhythm, and the rhythm is part of what's wrong with this building. Any other discussion from the board before I call for the vote?
I'd like to say one thing. I think we agree that there are new details for windows and cornice and that sort of thing are okay. I think we've agreed on that, correct? Because there's been no comment and they've made improvements on that. The windows have button bars, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
All righty. Well, let's call for the vote then. Bill?
Aye.
For preliminary approval. Okay. Aye. Mr. Karpus?
Aye with comments.
Yep. Greg?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye with comments.
And I'm a yes as well, or an aye as well. All right. Thank you very much. Tim, on to the next applicant, please.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The
Thank you.
next item under old business is the Central Avenue Townhomes. Give me a second here. Get there. All right. This is also a request for preliminary and final approval for a proposed 60-unit townhome development on 10.95 acres. The zoning is UCMX, Urban Corridor Mixed Use. This is currently mostly undeveloped, and this was previously at the board for conceptual review on December 17th, 2020, not 2021. I'm sorry, we haven't gotten there yet. The following are staff's comments. Tree removal permit and site plan overlay is required. That has not yet been submitted. The photometric plan is required and according to the applicant is still in process. The townhome should be evaluated based on section 4.3.4, and staff feels that the proposed elevations are in conformance with the design guidelines. The townhome elevations provide a mix of materials: brick, horizontal and vertical siding, window styles, and shingle roofs. We can start with the overall site, Central Avenue here. This is White Gables and Guilford Drive. I will turn it over to the applicant and allow him to, or them to, address the board and any questions that you may have.
Hey Tim, this is Jason Hutchinson. Thanks for the introduction there. And I'm with Thomas & Hutton and on the civil side. We really don't have a whole lot of changes from the first submittal. We added a landscape plan. we've added some more details to the architectural plans as far as the materials go. Just want to touch base on the landscape plan, if you don't mind jumping to that, and then I'll turn it over to y'all for any questions and comments. That overall looks good. There you go. Thank you, sir. We just wanted to discuss the buffer along the front Central Avenue there. You know, it's technically required for zoning, but we thought this would be a good opportunity to talk to you all about possibly eliminating that so that we can see the building frontages there. You know, we've got setbacks that kind of promote moving those buildings up to the road frontage, and it seems kind of odd to block it with the buffer there. So just wanted to see if the board was open to removing that, at least in front of where the building frontage itself is. Otherwise, we really didn't change much, so we're happy to answer any questions you have. We've got our landscape architect on, and we also have a few folks from Lennar on that can help with any architectural questions. Thank you.
One thing I'd like to point out, and maybe it's a question for Tim, is they are asking for preliminary and final, but
yes,
Tim, we have seen this, what, twice already?
No, this is we've only seen it once. They came in for conceptual in December. They did not submit for January, and this is the second time that we're seeing it officially here.
Okay. Yeah, and there were very, very minor comments.
Yes, generally you guys were very supportive of most of the elements on the of the plan, elevations. I think there was a number of really minor comments, truthfully, mostly about just details. So.
Yeah, I think really the only comment that we had was to provide some more information on the materials that we were using. So we added some information to the architectural elevations to better describe the materials there.
One comment I have regarding landscaping is I think you need to have some, and but I don't think it all has to be within that buffer area, because if I'm understanding the plan correctly, there's the property line, there's landscaping, and the buffer stops, and there's this gap between that dashed line and the sidewalk. I think that buffer planting can be, you know, it can go from property line to sidewalk instead of being within that 20 feet or whatever it is, 10 feet, 20 feet. I think you have the whole space to work with. And I'm looking kind of on the right-hand side of the screen over there. So I think you have more room to work with. I hear you on why are we providing a buffer on our front porch. I'm willing to give some flexibility on exactly what's in there. I don't think it necessarily has to meet the code per se, but I do think it needs to be designed, and I think it needs to be good design, and it has to have something. You know, if it's missing a handful of shrubs or trees or whatever, I'm fine with that along that front buffer just in front of the houses. So I guess I would just leave it at that, and I don't want to say leave it to your discretion, but I guess I'm giving you some latitude to make some changes there that are reflective of design and not just kind of checking the boxes meeting code. So I think that's just about all I've got to say for that. Anyone else on the board have any comments? Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I can offer some thoughts. I was not on the board for the prior meetings of this, if it was reviewed. The units, the townhomes are very, very nice. The floor plans are beautiful. Elevations are beautiful. I'm thrilled that, and I live very close by, and I'm thrilled that we're getting that kind of quality of construction along Central Avenue. And there should be a lot of happy homeowners. When I look at the site plan, just because, and I'm sure there's a reason, with why it was set like that. But to me, it seems backwards. Like I would take the pond and move it up on Central and push everything back along from the road, because Central's pretty busy. When we bought our house 20 years ago, we're not right on Central, but I think there's one row of houses between us and Central. The noise is getting worse and worse and worse every year. And those townhomes seem really close to, and there's one section when you get near town where they've reduced the speed to 35, but 50 is the rule out there. It's a lot of noise. And it just seems odd that you would have this buffer between what I assume is that White Gables behind it, or is that Guilford? It's White Gables.
Yes, that's White Gables behind.
Yeah, it seems
here.
Funny that you'd have this big buffer between your development, and White Gables is a really nice neighborhood. I've been in there several times, and it's similar in a lot of ways to what you're doing. It's a very nice, high quality, but not overly priced neighborhood. And you have this huge buffer between two nice neighborhoods. But then the other part of the development is right on the busy street. It just seems odd to me. I would have pushed the whole thing back or down on the page and put more buffer up front. But, I'm sure there's a reason for it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Central, most of the buildings on Central are set back, and it has a certain character. There are some apartment homes between this site and downtown that are very, very close to the road. But I think those were built before Central was really a busy street. And now they're like, wow, that's really close to the road. And they put those nice cedars in front, so that helps a little bit, but they're still awfully close. And then it's either on this side or very close by, there's that old farm that has a pond out front and the ducks and the horses and all that. That's right in this area. But that seems to be more in character, where the buildings are a little further back. And there's some, remnants of old Somerville where somebody still has livestock and ducks and things like that, which is kind of nice. And then to have this new development go right on the street, I'm just like, is that really what we want? I'm not saying we do or don't. I guess it's a question. Is this really the future of our nice little town that when we moved here, I said, this is just like Mayberry. And now I feel like it's just like Mount Pleasant. And I don't want to be in Mount Pleasant. I want to be in Mayberry. And we keep losing that every day.
Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to comment, and I certainly don't have the architectural knowledge that Greg does, but for the request to remove that buffer from the front of those units, my first thought was, oh my gosh, you need that because the sound needs a buffer. It is really going to be a problem. I sell real estate. I know what I'm going to be up against as I try to sell a unit that is that close to Central Avenue without some buffer. So I just think you can move the buffer and you can spread it a little bit, but you need a buffer to protect those units badly.
Candy, that's a great comment. I believe the way these footprints work as well as that is the front door.
Which is really.
Which is what, Candy?
I think that's even more of a reason to have a buffer.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look here,
Central Ave,
the front doors do face, and I measured this out earlier based on other discussion. Here, this is edge of pavement here. Then you have the final portion of the right of way, their proposed 15-foot buffer, and then the lots are here and they're set back 5 feet. So the front of these units is approximately 20 feet because there is a subsequent HOA parcel in between that is proposed to be landscaped. So just to give you some of those,
measurements.
So you know what the reality of it is. They're not literally up on the street. I just since I did this work earlier, I figured I'd show it to everyone.
Now, when you say edge of pavement, that's assuming the current road configuration.
Mhm.
And the idea of a right-of-way, and Tim, you know this more than me because you're like a planner, but my understanding of a right-of-way is that's land that is owned by the public. So if the road ever has to get wider, it's there and they don't have to go through any hassles to get the land. So the right-of-way is there to protect you in the future, that if things need to get wider, you can widen that road. So just because it's 56 feet 4 inches today, you know, may not always be that way. It may get wider. It's not going to get narrower, I don't think, unless we get these electric self-driving cars people are talking about, but it's probably going to get wider.
It also allows for other public amenities such as sidewalks and other various things, you know, paths that are that could be utilized by the future residents of this. So that's part of what that is. Although they do have, you know, an internal sidewalk that is, you know, per the requirements of the ordinance, you know, there would be the potential for sidewalk along the frontage here. The town is has plans for in the more distant future to do sidewalk on the other side of Central, but you know, that's what right of way is for those types of things. Yes, for potential future widenings, maybe a turn lane, deceleration lane, and other things along those lines.
I think I'm going to jump in support of what Greg and Candy have said. I'd really want to encourage the buffer to stay there, the plantings to stay there. One, for the reason Greg was talking, because everything's pushed up to the street there. You know, I see doing that with commercial buildings to create a pedestrian feel, although I'm not sure that even is a typical thing that I'm greatly in favor of. However, these aren't commercial buildings; these are homes, and pushing them up to the road when there is such a large space in the back is creating something different than what's out there. And so I think that the preservation of the planting along the street there would at least help to mitigate some of that if you're going to have everything up close to the street. And it is good for noise and everything. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and we don't as far as the right of way goes. But I think creating a good soft edge on that street on Central Avenue is more in line with what's typical for Somerville residents along Central Avenue than what's proposed. So if they're going to keep them up on the street, I would say keep that buffer in place.
If I could jump in for just a minute. We are not against having the buffer there. The main reason that I was suggesting potentially taking it out is because we felt like it was, the zoning was kind of pushing us in that direction. Understanding based on a comment earlier from the board, you guys can alleviate some of those zoning requirements, and we're happy to keep the buffer up there. We just felt like the units addressing the street, that the zoning kind of pushed us to allow those to be seen. We're happy to keep it if everybody wants to leave it there, and we can also incorporate Chris's comment about flexibility in the buffer to make that a little bit more not as linear, and kind of break it up and use the full space available to us to move those around a little bit.
And one other thing I see is if you look at the group of townhomes on the right, 55 through 60, those have an opportunity to slide back. If you're looking at, say, the number 50 as the minimum you can do, 55 to 60 can slide back another 10, 15 feet.
Lots of room.
Yeah, from the road, further away from the road.
We can look at that.
Alrighty, and again, if there's, if you've got an extra 5 feet on each block, down on the 29 to 43 and the 7 through 28 or whatever, if you've got 5 feet extra, everything can slide down. I know once it's in the computer, sometimes it's hard to change things somehow, but if there's extra room, that could all slide down.
Hey Chris.
Certainly that block on the upper right.
Hey Chris, it's Chris.
Go ahead.
Hey man, we're just sitting here. I think we can incorporate these comments. We've been working with the zoning code as it was written, and that was pushing to encourage the homes to be as close to the road as possible. I think within 5 feet of the right of way, which is why it started there. Certainly, I think we agree with y'all that it would be better to kind of soften that edge a little bit and create maybe a little bit more buffer, but also, keep that linear space livable and kind of, keep that home front, right? That front porch feel to it. So I don't see any reason we couldn't push those back and make that happen.
Yep. Well, I think we're all saying we would support moving that back as far as you can. So I think sounds like we're all on the same page.
Yeah, we're good with that.
All right, good deal. Good deal. All right, are there any comments related to architecture? Bill, do you have any comments?
Not really. I was confused about what was the front and what was the back as far as central's concerned, but the actual front elevation faces central, and that's important because the back elevation is not that great.
Sure. Carolyn, any comments?
No, I agree with Greg when he said the pond on the front. That would be really pretty, but that might change the whole layout more so than what they're willing to do. So the way it is, and I definitely think they should keep the buffer on the front if it's like the way it is.
All right, yeah, and I would suspect that the pond is in the location that it, from an engineering standpoint, has to be, because if you see on the left side of the site plan, there's an existing pond that appears to be an existing pond that's real close. So that's probably that's probably the low part of the site. Mr. Carpus, do you have any comments on site or building?
Tim, can you go to the elevations?
Any particular one you want me to, just this one, or do you want the
color
rendered?
one rendered would be good. One of my concerns is that the ones that are, there you go. I like each of them individually. I think they look nice and well designed. When it comes to the colors, all in one elevation would be something that I would like to see, because we're looking them when they're rendered this way, they give the impression that they are more unique, almost like standalone residences, but all together, we're going to see them all together from Central Avenue with all the different colors and all the different materials. And I would want to see that rendering all as one rendering. Because I don't dislike it. I think it looks really good. Actually, each individual unit looks pretty good, but all together, I'm not sure that all the differing materials and colors are going to work until I see it represented that way. Do you all have a rendering of the entire front of the building together without any of the shading?
We can get you one. I don't have one handy that I can send out today, but we can certainly get the architect to pull one together.
I think it would be good for the board to see, so we could see it as one whole cohesive unit at a time.
Absolutely.
And a question for the applicant is, does the homeowner choose the color, or do you all choose that? And so the end unit is always going to be the gray or the beige, and the brick one is always going to be where it is, or is all that kind of determined later?
Alvin, I think you're on. You want to take that one?
Yeah, this is Alvin with Lennar. Those colors would be predetermined by Lennar, as we want to make sure that they all mesh together. So as in the past when we've done townhomes, we determine those colors up front.
Great.
And to your point, we very seldom, these are renderings that we had from a different division, but we very seldom mix and match the different colors within the units. So there's no problem with us having a full rendering of the individual units with the shake and siding or whatever it may be as far as board and batten. As far as those elevations are concerned, there's no problem keeping that consistent within the individual elevation.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, sounds like if you just kind of put that rendering together, we'll get there. Alrighty. Mr. Stoika, any comments?
No, I think that was a good comment by Chris. I agree completely. We need to see the whole front elevation in color. But architecturally, as I said earlier, these are really nice. And I think people are going to be thrilled to live there.
Okay. Alrighty. I don't know if I called on everybody or not. Candy, I feel like maybe I didn't call on you, but Candy, do you or does anyone else have any other comments before we call for a motion?
I do want to point out that we have received multiple inquiries from the property owners in both White Gables and Guilford Gates. They do have concerns with traffic being generated by 60 townhome units. The only access on the, for the site requires the use of those existing roads, and that is consistent with our requirements. So, and, DOT did, that was the layout that was dictated to them for various reasons. That being said, I did want to highlight that Lennar still does need to meet with the Homeowners Association. If they haven't done so, I believe their originally planned meeting was canceled. And I think that they need to continue to work with them and make sure that the project isn't negatively impactful on the existing developments over there. And that's all.
Very good. Okay, so the applicant is asking for preliminary and final. Sounds like we may have some conditions. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'm not really feeling it for final.
Well, if we're
preliminary, I think it's more than preliminary. Final, I think they should come back for final based on the comments we've made.
Okay, so that would be your motion.
Unless there's some compelling reason to do both. It seems like we should do one step at a time.
Carolyn, did you have something?
We need to see the color rendering that they're going to have all at one, what we talked about a few minutes ago. We would need for them to come back and show us that, right?
That and some better sense of, is there any relief they can give to Central in terms of pushing some or all of the buildings back? Which they may come back and say, no, we can't, but I think they should at least look at it again and confirm if there's any relief from Central possible.
All right, I think there's a motion on the floor. Greg is saying preliminary, he's willing to give a final, I'm sorry, he's willing to give preliminary approval. Carolyn, did you second that?
Yes.
For preliminary? I think you did. Yep. Okay. Any further discussion?
Was that a comment?
Yeah, it was. All right, well, so just to recap, for preliminary approval, and the conditions are sliding building back, seeing what can be done along Central, adjusting the buffer. That's primarily it, I believe.
And the colored rendering of the buildings.
And the colored rendering, that's right. Do you feel like they need to come back to full board for that, or is that something that, well, I guess if you're asking for preliminary, then it is. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, unless there's some urgency that can't wait another month.
Hey, Chris and Greg, I apologize. This is Tim with Lennar. I have a color rendering. Is that something I could show or share my screen right now, or I don't want to?
You know, the materials are all supposed to be submitted in advance so that we can look at it and sleep on it.
Yeah.
We don't really want to get in the, and for your case, it's probably not a big deal because Lennar is a premium brand, but it's a precedent you set. And we don't want to be in future meetings and somebody say, well, you let Lennar come and show stuff. And you're not, you know, I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, I think there's time. I think we have to just.
If you do something nice for one good person and the next person is going to come and make you regret that day.
Yeah, I think we have to just see all that on the next time. And really, they are supposed to be true examples and samples and stuff like that. And we're not there. So, all right. Well, there is a motion on the floor for preliminary approval. And there is a second. So I'm going to call for the vote. Candy. Candy, are you there?
Yes, I vote for that.
Yes. Bill?
Yes.
Mr. Karpus?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Yes, and I'm a yes. There you go. Preliminary approval with the 3 items that we've mentioned. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
The third item under new business or old business, I apologize, is a request for preliminary approval for a proposed 7,000 square foot car wash on 1.7 acres. This is on Ladson Road next to the currently under construction Parker's Kitchen. Staff does have the following comments regarding this. Photometric plan is still required. Written permission from the appropriate utility will be needed for the plantings and brick wall that are shown within those utility easements. Staff would still like to see a stub out for connectivity to the northern residual parcel. Brick screening fences have been provided around the vacuum mechanicals. The elevations have been evaluated against Chapter 4 of the UDO, and staff has determined that the elevations are generally in conformance with the required sections. The finishes include brick, fiber cement siding, and standing seam metal roof. One thing that is not permitted and would need to be approved by the DRB is that there is an LED lighting strip on the front tower. The applicant has provided an alternate elevation concerning the front canopy, so you guys would need to review those too. The front facing facade does not meet the 65% transparency requirement, and that can be approved by the DRB, and a detail and elevation of the proposed screening wall at the frontage of Ladson Road has not been provided and should be, as well as one for the dumpster enclosure. Those are staff's comments, and I can turn this over to the applicant. I think I will start with the site plan first. And I will turn it over to the applicant to discuss their project.
Thank you, Tim. This is Thomas Martin, civil site designer with EarthSource Engineering. So not a whole lot has changed from a site layout and traffic flow pattern since the last submittal conceptual DRB, which was December 17th. We did incorporate staff and board feedback and comments, including moving the dumpster and the vacuum mechanical equipment further from the right-of-way to screen it from view from Ladson Road. Also added pedestrian connection to the right-of-way and a landscape plan. Other than that, the site layout overall has remained the same. And Tim, I know Tim mentioned Dominion, the easement up front owned by Dominion. We have spoken with them about the encroachment, and we've got a verbal okay from them, but still working to get something in writing, as well as a photometric plan. I think that's it for the site layout, and I'll turn it over to Will Morrison with the architect with the Middleton Group to discuss the building.
All right, thanks, Thomas. So I'm just going to quickly go through the staff's comments, and then we can touch on the Canopy Design. If you could scroll to, it should be the last slide. Yeah, there you go. So I guess starting with some of the comments that you just reiterated were the 36-inch high perimeter screen wall, the dumpster enclosure, and the motor enclosures are all proposed to be brick. The brick will match that of the Parkers in the building. And they dumpster enclosure and motor enclosure are proposed to be 7 to 8 feet high, depending on the equipment and dumpsters selected. So, and for final, we will submit details and elevations for your review. The LED light note that was on the elevations, that note in 24 is actually an old note and is no longer applicable and is not being considered for the project. So we don't have to worry about that moving forward. The front facade facing Ladson Road, as you can see from these perspectives here, is fairly small, and it hosts the program elements that don't really lend themselves to having meaningful fenestration. So we feel that the design as is an appropriate facade to face Ladson Road, and with the inclusion of the canopy element, which we think is a nice architectural feature at the front, and with its lower proportions, bringing it down to a more pedestrian scale, we feel like that hopefully will appease the DRB to allow us to not meet the 65% transparency requirement. Going into the canopy design, we have a primary option here at the top, and then a secondary option below, depending on the board's views. The one at the top has a taller solid board and batten wall between the neighboring side of the property line side of the property there, along the tunnel exit, to provide both a visual and acoustic barrier between the tunnel and the operations there in the neighboring property. On the other side of the tunnel, we have a aesthetic V-shaped column supporting a open trellis, since programmatically it's not necessary to have a solid roof there. This is mostly to meet the build to line and provide an architectural gesture towards Ladson Road. And also with the V-shaped column, it allows us to get a wider turning radius when coming out of the tunnel on the side there. In terms of materials, we're going to match the board and batten color and siding there on the opaque wall. And then for the steel will be painted white to match. And then we were looking at the aluminum trellis members matching the color of the standing seam roof. The alternate design below echoes the standing seam roof on the other side and is an opaque roof if that, is more of a desire. If the board feels that matches the existing design a little closer. So, and that really is the only significant change between the conceptual design and this design. So with that, we're happy to field any questions and address any of your thoughts.
Tim, I think on this one, a plan was added, like a context plan or something. Can you tell us why that was added and describe it?
So let me go up to what was provided. We received a couple of phone calls and emails with concerns from residents of Limehouse Villas up here. They were extremely concerned with the development of the car wash on Ladson Road. Specifically, one of their biggest concerns is the stacking lane. Here, they were under the impression that it would be much closer to their property line up here. It is, when you take a look here, they have provided this sketch to show that, at its closest from property line to property line, the residual parcel will be about 258 feet from here to there, 295 feet, and 332 feet. Averages out across this to about 295 feet. So hopefully these trees that are currently on the site are not proposed to be removed at this time. They will remain as is. So I hope that this helps the residents who are concerned understand what is out there, and they were very quick in getting that over to us so that we could provide that so anybody who's watching can see what that separation is and what's going to remain between the back of their house and what's being developed here.
Alrighty, thank you for that. And Tim, one other thing, and I may have missed it because I was kind of looking at plans too at the time, but there was mention of a wall along the front, and it looks like there's a wall shown, but there's no detail provided. Is that
That's one of the items that was missing, and that's one of the items that Will Morrison just said, and this is preliminary. They will be providing those at the time of final details for for that wall there.
Great, thank you. I have a question for Will, or whoever is doing the site. It may not be Will. Sorry.
Oh, that would be Thomas.
All right, Thomas. Sorry about that. Thomas, there's on the planting plan. There's on the left-hand side of the building, there's a lot of slag shown on the plan, which is just rock. What was the design rationale for having rock there?
You're talking about, Chris, behind the building, between the building and the property line there?
Yes, sir. Along the long side of the building.
It's just an area that sometimes can be tough to access and maintain back there. I know we've got a fence on one side between us and the residents there, and it can be difficult to access for maintenance, getting back there to cut grass and all that. So that was the idea, the rationale behind it.
Alrighty, and it's hard these days to see the fence on these, the way I have to do plans now, but is that your fence or their fence?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the line with the X's through it to the left on their property. That is the 8-foot wooden fence behind the residences in their backyard.
But there's no fence. You are not building the fence though, correct?
No.
Okay. All right. My feeling is that needs to be fully landscaped to be kind of more of a good neighbor instead of the flag. When I say landscaping, I'm thinking, maybe a row of cedars or some evergreens or something that really protects those neighbors a little bit more. I'm not suggesting it's just pine straw or grass or something like that. I think that needs to be more of an evergreen trees, not just a hedge, but some type of evergreen, so to help limit the view to the building from their backyards. And I'd like that to be planted close enough where it is immediately seen, planted tip to tip, whatever that ends up being, but that's just a comment that I have.
So Chris,
there's an awful lot of, go ahead.
So I think I'm tracking you. So we did add some cedars at the entrance and exit of the wash, but you're wanting the whole way down.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, the concern is what the neighbors are seeing from their backyards. Yeah, not just at the entrance, but along the building as well. Although it's a good-looking building, but I'm sure they would rather look at a row of trees instead of taller walls and roofs and stuff like that.
Can I ask a question real quick, Chris?
Absolutely.
All right, the zoning on for the car wash is NB, neighborhood business.
Oh, it's UCMX.
Oh, it is UCMX.
Yes.
I saw NB on one of these drawings. That's what I was wondering.
That might be across the street, but this corner here is all UCMX. The Parkers, this property, the residual acreage to the north, UCMX. And the opposite corner is all UCMX.
Okay, and the property on the left, what is that zoned? Well, we're
That's
talking
out.
About the fence.
This over here is a residential neighborhood in Dorchester County. It's not within the town. Obviously it still matters. Their residents directly adjacent. And they need to be taken into account. Yeah. So, but I'm not 100% positive what the Dorchester County zoning is for that particular development.
So if because the UDO says if you're NB, which you're not, you have to have a 30-foot buffer against any other kind of property zoning. And they got a 15-foot buffer. I was curious about that.
Yeah, they with UCMX, the mixed use, the buffer requirement is 15 feet between itself and residential.
And according to the table in the UDO, this kind of business would be a conditional use for UCMX zoning then.
That's correct.
So what are the conditions for it being used as this?
Give me a minute.
Unknown caller.
All right. We have that as a drive-through facility in UCMX. The drive-through services must be located to the rear. Obviously, there's not a window per se. The stacking area may not encroach into the front yard, which it does not. Stacking lanes 1, and that may be increased subject to design review, which is you. The stacking lanes are prohibited from circulating between the building and the primary street, which they do not. And they're not in between that and a secondary street. And then it has some sign requirements and conditions. But generally, they are meeting those. Was it? Yeah.
They do meet the conditions. That's good.
Yes.
Alrighty. Let's try to. Are there any other site comments before we move on to architecture?
Chris, I would just like to add, I'd like to go back to your comment about the stones or the rocks or something against the proposed building. And I'm curious, I don't know a lot about car washes. I think they recirculate a lot of their water. But is there some concern that there'll be water coming out of that building? Is that a need for the rocks so that the water, so the soil doesn't get muddy and that type of thing? I mean, could the applicant address that?
This is Brian Cook. I'm the owner, and it's all of the water from the car wash goes through a water reclamation system, and then it passes to the sanitary.
It's all reclaimed.
Yeah, there's no leak.
So it was really just more of just another way to fill the area. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's just you know, ease of maintenance, and also to be able to. Sometimes you need to get you know, when you repaint the towers and things in the future, you need to get one of those cherry picker kind of through there. We did this at our current site in North Main, and it came out great.
It looks good there too.
It actually looks very nice, and then this would have, you know, we had a retaining wall there, so we just filled in the space with the stones, and it was probably, I don't know, 10 feet or 10 or 15 feet. Here we've done a lot of plantings like ustrums and cedars, and there is some existing trees there to create a hedge. And then we were just going to take the area in between the building and that pine straw landscape area and fill that with, it's kind of about the size of 57 stone.
Okay, well, thank you for that explanation, Jimmy.
Sure.
All right, moving on to architecture. Starting at the top again on my list that I wrote down. Bill, do you have any comments regarding architecture? I think they had a couple examples to choose from.
I would go for the optional with the slanted roof on the exit canopy from the drive-through. Other than that, I don't have any comments.
Alrighty, Tim, would you mind flipping to that slide when you get a chance?
Yes, sir. Just a moment. Actually, one quick thing. The board, you know, the stub out connection here for connectivity. You know, staff feels strongly that this should be included. I know engineering had some questions if it would be necessary. The only access to the site really is through another site. So if we can build that into the site and allow for access here so that if and or when that residual parcel develops, it would provide the opportunity for another access point, and people would be able to get through both for life safety issues, for emergency vehicles, etc. Obviously they can fight a fire from Ladson, but it's always better to get closer when you're doing that type of thing, or for EMS. And if traffic backs up along here, it might be difficult to get in. So that's the reasoning behind staff's request for that.
And Tim, is that parcel you're talking about stubbing out to, is that zoned for future commercial, or what is that zoned for?
It's UCMX. It's mixed use zoning. So it could be apartments. It could be, I shouldn't have said that. It could be more townhouses. It could be single family. It could be mix of uses, such as, multi-story buildings that have both residential and commercial on the first floor. UCMX is one of our more flexible categories in that it has allows for more auto-oriented businesses. Obviously a gas station and a car wash here, but they do need to meet certain conditions. It isn't straight general business where they could have the sea of parking in front, and there's no build to lines necessarily. That was the intent. So that is where we're at. Is maintains the same zoning that's currently on these properties on that residual parcel.
Okay. It just seems like, Ladson, I think, is very diverse in terms of a mixture of housing and commercial. And if you're going to do commercial, putting it on the corner of Ladson and a side street makes a lot of sense. But as you get further away from Ladson, it just seems, do you really want to put a commercial use back there even closer to that housing development?
It's a 6-acre parcel that was actually previously zoned GB and never really developed until recently. When we actually, the Parkers was in the process of buying it when the zoning went through. They were able to modify their plan to meet the conditions, and they did bring their building closer to the front. This gas station car wash has moved their tunnel forward and closer. They're providing that canopy to meet that build to line that is required. And all of the activity is being pulled closer to Ladson and further away from those residential uses.
But it's a separate, is it a separate property from the Parkers, or is it one property?
It was all one single 6-acre parcel, and Parkers purchased it and they have been parceling it off. We advocate for that connectivity. That's why I brought it up. I wanted to make sure that it was addressed if it was missed in my staff comments at the beginning when I introduced the project. Make sure that everyone's aware that we're still looking for that connection for the future development, be it a residential development potentially or a future commercial. But it can be either or.
Mm-hmm.
Did that address your question? Or
yes.
Did I miss something? Okay.
Nope.
Tim, could you go to that architectural slide when you get a chance?
Yep. Just trying to get my notes.
Yeah. And Mr. Karpus, you want to?
Do you want?
Do you have any comments on regard to architecture?
3D, or do you want the?
That I think
the line elevation.
Whichever one shows the architectural choices between the two.
Well, hold on.
Or was it the other one?
Stay on this for a second, because we were talking about the side facing the residential, the Dorchester County residential area. So it's good to see that. I knew it wouldn't be, super detailed or anything like that. I agree with Mr. Campo's comments that some additional trees along that side would be good, just with all the metal on that side. Yeah. So if you could go to that the options All right. I would say for me, the top option is better. It adds a little bit more articulation on that canopy, even though it's different than the roof along the side. Part of the reason being is that whatever the makeup of that wall is, that canopy needs to die into the wall and the wall not become a vertical part of the canopy like it looks like on the bottom. It looks like kind of just a waterfall, and I get it. Anyway, a waterfall of metal on the back side of that canopy, whereas the top one is more articulated and the canopy itself dies into the wall rather than becomes sort of integrated with it somehow. And I think that might just be the way it's rendered, but nonetheless, the top option to me makes a little bit more sense architecturally. It's a lot cleaner in that it's a articulated, it's not really covered, but it's just got a little bit more articulation and it dies into the wall. And so I would look forward to seeing that wall detail. But as it is right now, I would go with that top option. If you're going to do that with some tubes, I'm wondering if you want to connect those the tubes of that with the brackets on the building somehow in color. I mean, they're all metal, right?
Sorry, am I muted? Okay, I think you can hear me now. We were looking at, aluminum for the trellis there, but the brackets, I believe, are actually wood. But we could definitely look at kind of tying that all together a little closer.
I think they both offer a little bit more articulation and detail to the building. And so if they're connected a little bit more, then we're not looking at a bunch of solid masses. We're looking at something that's got a little bit more more to it. And so the top option with maybe looking at connecting the trellis material and color with the bracket material and color, I think would be a good look, unless it's just this stark dark brackets on an otherwise light colored white building, which I'm not looking for that. We're not trying to say, hey, look at the brackets, you know. But somehow looking at those combined and working together, I think would make some sense. But other than that, you know, no problem.
Craig?
Sure. Again, I'm new to the board. I believe this is like the second time the project's been here. So there was a prior review meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my comments may seem odd just because it's kind of like the first time I'm reviewing this. And the reason I asked about the other development parcel is it seems because we're sort of abutting two different neighborhoods, that this parcel seems to me would be better if it were a cohesive architectural assembly of buildings rather than multiple landowners doing their own thing. Now, in contrast to Main Street in Somerville, which I love, a business owner there really has to compete for attention. There's a lot going on. And there's car washes on there. They're pretty cool. And they kind of jump out and say, here I am, I'm a car wash and I'm different from my neighbors. So, you know, on Highway 78 in Somerville, Main Street, I think it's interesting that each building owner has to make like an individual statement to be seen. Whereas this parcel, it seems it's compact enough. There's a great opportunity to almost do like a commercial neighborhood where the buildings don't imitate each other, but they're compatible aesthetically. And when I look at this, and I haven't seen the design for this exact Parker's, but there's one in my neighborhood. they're kind of new around here, but they do, for a gas station, mini mart, they do a pretty good job with their design. You can, is a great design? No, it's not. But for a big corporate thing, they really try. And I look at this design and I say, I'm not seeing any compatibility with the Parkers. It shouldn't imitate the Parkers, but there should be some commonality. So when you come in and you go into this entrance off Limehouse, and you see the Parkers and the Canopy. So if you could go back to the site plan a minute, Tim, I want to point this out. If you could draw maybe some boxes around, you have Parkers and then the Canopy, and then the next spot over is the car wash. And, there's a pattern set up just by building placement, but I'm not seeing any sort of aesthetic tie that would unify this into a commercial mixed use development, which I think would help your customers as well as the overall aesthetics of this area. Because I think that residential neighborhood to the left on the drawing, that's probably going to stay there. That's probably always going to be housing of some sort. It's not going to, this street, part of the street is not going to continue this pattern of Parker's car wash, mini mart, whatever other, it's going to be this corner. Is going to be the commercial corner, and to create that feeling of neighborhood, which I'm just not seeing. And I think there's an opportunity there to really leverage the value of this entire corner in development, rather than coming across as separate, absolutely distinct, nothing in common aesthetic. In addition to that, there's something about, as Somerville continues to grow and develop, hopefully in a positive way, there's something about building aesthetic and what are the images that we are drawing, what images are coming out from your past experience. And Tim, if you could go back to either the elevations or perspective, let's do the perspective. The concerns I have with design, again, relative to Parker's. Now, if Parker's was doing this, I would feel different, but I don't think they are. So there's just a lot of metaphors here. The brackets on the building, why do buildings have brackets? We have brackets in Hutchinson Square that LSRP designed, beautiful park structure. There are brackets on the prior Lennar project that we had, but those, even though they weren't functional brackets on the Lennar, it was a roof over a bay. And you can kind of say, well, there's a bay window and you got to support the overhanging roof. You probably didn't really need to. But when you look at it, the brackets kind of made sense. And I look at this and I'm like, what are those brackets doing? They're supporting a flat roof, but the flat roof overhang isn't really providing any kind of functional purpose. It just seems like, oh, we have this box, let's put some brackets on an overhang and it'll look good. To me, that's not really, it doesn't talk about car wash. It doesn't talk about the neighborhood. It's just like, there it is. And the other metaphor is the V. And I have a farm up in Rosenville, and I take, I think it's 176 to get up there, 178, one of those roads. And there's an old, there's a motorcycle shop along the way. I've never stopped there because those guys scare me. And, but they have the same kind of V-shaped thing. So I think that's like a South Carolina icon or image, those V's. I'll have to look into that. But they were used on old gas stations, I think. I think this place was an old gas station. And it probably made sense for the gas station to have these V's. But I look at this and say, is that what we're recalling? Because they were freestanding things. They didn't have like a solid wall on the end. It was like the pre-canopy before, they really engineered these things. So this and then the steel siding, and, the steel siding has a lot of South Carolina references too. And I look at this and it's just not real clear. Are these materials and images you're drawing from other South Carolina buildings intentional? And how do they feed into the function of a car wash, and how do they support the overall aesthetic of this neighborhood? And it just doesn't, I just don't get it.
So, hey, Greg, can I cut in here? I think there might be some misconceptions here. First of all, it's not metal siding, it's board and batten. And it is going to be in the color palette, I mean, including the brick itself, are going to be literal matches to the Parkers. And like part of the design of the towers with, you know, some detailing with the brackets is based on, you know, the Wash Wizard prototype, which has been used elsewhere in Somerville, that we feel is contextually appropriate. So I just wanted to clarify those things, that we are matching materials, we are matching color, and that we agree that it is a good idea to try and create sort of a little campus here of similar buildings. So, you know, I feel like we have already tried to address that and you know, with our material palette.
Well, it would be helpful if that were part of the presentation then, you know, to show, to not gray out Parkers, but actually show a site plan and some site elevations and the actual colors of the Parkers, so you can start to talk about the relationship. Because without that information, it's hard to know, you know, what it is really and how it relates.
Sure. I mean, yeah.
Greg, I think.
Oh, go for it.
Greg, I think those are great comments. I really do. And I appreciate your explanation of that. I think to kind of keep it moving, what would be helpful, and Greg mentioned it, is you're only asking for preliminary. But I think it would be good if you would, as Greg said, show the context of Parkers and how it relates. And maybe you need to reconsider the brackets or maybe some of those other elements. But if you kind of pick up on Parkers, if we're assuming that Parkers is kind of the standard, at least in this little neighborhood that we want to go after, show us how those things are matching and it looks cohesive. And I would also say that also on the landscape plan, because one of the things we kind of lose sometimes is context. So if you can get the Parkers landscape plan and your landscape plan and kind of make it, this will help you guys too. Let's see how all this flows together so it doesn't look like just a bunch of individual developments. That being said, Greg, do you have any other comments, or anyone else have comments?
I have a comment, Chris. Greg, I'm sorry.
Sure.
If you want to go first.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Good.
My comment is, this is at a Zoom meeting is very difficult. When we're in person and we can see materials and see color and see the real thing, and it just is so much easier. So Greg's comment of trying to show the adjoining so that we see some continuity would be helpful, but it also would be really helpful if we got some colors so we knew what we were looking at. Like, you know, it's an easy assumption to think that's metal and it's board and batten, you know, so we need these materials. We need better explanations. Otherwise we're just spinning our wheels. So.
I agree, 100%, Sandy. Great,
can I
great
jump
call.
in real quick?
Sure.
I do want to remind the board that, and this is Greg, I want to point it out to you that the approval for the Parkers did require the addition of brackets to the canopy of the Parkers gas station next door. So they're not out of context necessarily with the adjacent property. Obviously, they don't have pictures. It's not completed at this point. And I just remembered that the board specifically required the brackets be added to the canopy and the columns to accent that detail on that property. So I don't know if anybody else from the board remembered that aspect of it, but they did specifically require that
Tim,
as a condition.
I would say on a canopy, you know, brackets start to make sense. You know, if you think of the old train sheds, you know, if you want to see brackets, go to an old train shed. That's where they had them because it was a functional, you know, people were waiting outside and it rained or snowed. And so they wanted an overhang, but they didn't want columns. So they ended up putting brackets so that you wouldn't have to have columns on an overhang. You know, there's a functional reason. And it's a stretch somewhat to do that at a gas station. But I see brackets on gas station canopies frequently. And I think, well, you know, at least it's honest, quote unquote. It's not just completely arbitrary. It's not structurally honest, but it's consistent with that prototype and the history of canopy and overhangs. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying the brackets are good or not good. I'm just saying, you know, let's look at, you know, how are they being used on the canopy? How are they being used on parkers? And if you like brackets, that's fine, but let's use them in a compatible way, in a consistent way across the developments.
Understood.
Great comments. I think, Greg, great comments, and something for the applicant to think about. I think the applicant has enough information. I think Will and Thomas are hearing us, and they kind of, I think they have some direction. So I think that's very good. Does anyone else on the board, would anyone else on the board like to make a comment? Or Greg, if you have more comments, but any other comments from the board?
We need more brackets, not less.
I like the brackets. Sorry, Greg, they may not be functional, but I like them. They look good. Okay.
I like the brackets, okay, but I hate this wall of just nothingness. Even if it is, I thought it was metal to start with, but even if it's board and batten, it still needs something. I would
some relief because it's all one long wall.
Right. At least a little relief. Yeah, would be helpful.
Let's put some brackets down there.
Big wooden eagles on the side.
Yeah, Sea Rock City. Any other comments from the board? All right. Before we call for a motion, is there anything else the applicant would like to say?
No, I think those are all great comments, and we'll you know, study it and present, you know, some modifications for final, and we'll try and come up with ways to you know, break up these long walls with you know, something aesthetic.
Yep, very good.
Good.
All right, anything else? I'm gonna call for the motion. They're asking for preliminary approval.
That's a motion, Chris?
Yeah, someone, I'm looking for a motion for.
Oh, well, since it's preliminary, I'm happy to provide a motion that we approve preliminary design contingent upon consideration of the Parker site, the site to the north, and to try and establish a vocabulary and interconnectedness of the buildings without imitating and confusing people by not being able to tell the difference. Enough difference so that people know if they're going to the gas station or car wash, but enough similarity that they belong together and tie these parcels together.
Alrighty, that's a motion for preliminary approval with conditions. Is there a second?
Go ahead.
I'll second it, but I'd like some discussion.
Okay, well, we have a second, so let's go ahead and discuss it then. Go ahead, Candy.
And I'm not sure Greg said this, maybe he did, but there needs to be some relief in the long building without any, particularly the side that you first drive up to and you see it. There needs to be a little bit of design in there. Maybe it's some big windows that show what's going on in there, or something that just isn't all of this board and batten with little doors and little windows on it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially when you think about the car wash, which might be yours, it might be somebody else's, but the newer car wash on Main Street. When you approach that, you're really not approaching it dead on to the side. Mm-hmm. You're kind of you see the front and the side kind of at the same time.
Right.
Whereas this one, the Parkers, when you drive into Parkers, you're right, you're
All you
just
see is this.
dead on.
Mhm.
And certainly not its main, pretty facade like Main Street is.
Just think it needs a little work. I mean, I think
No.
they've done what they can with this site, and I just think that elevation needs a little work.
Mhm.
Okay.
And it's also probably pretty visible from the Limehouse Ladson. So if you're going right to left on the drawing, you're going to pick up that facade probably more than you would on Main Street, where the neighbor buildings kind of cut off a lot of the views of the sides of those longer buildings.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So we have a motion.
All right, any other discussion? Yeah, well, is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I would call for the vote. Candy?
I'm in favor of the motion with comments that have been made to be addressed.
Great. Bill?
Yes.
Mr. Carpus?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right, thank you so much. Good job.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next applicant is, I believe it's Lossie with Trolley Square.
That is correct. The next item on the agenda is an application for final approval for a proposed exterior renovation of the existing shopping center located at 1525 and 1545 Old Trolley Road. Current zoning is UCMX. Just a reminder that the proposed facade changes exceed 50% of the total facade and require design review board approval. This is technically the first meeting for this. It had previously been in front of the board back in, actually, ironically, August of 2020. I think I grabbed the old one, old staff report, but I apologize for that. But there's really not a lot of update. They're proposing some facade changes. They did get final approval for the facade changes that were proposed just to the back building. They're coming back with a full multi-phase master plan for the improvements to the Trolley Square Shopping Center. So I will hand this over to Lossie and Lee Rodriguez, and I know that the owners are potentially on here. I will let them address the board.
Good evening, guys. This is Lossie Knight with LFK Architects. As Tim said, in our last presentation, we proposed sort of minimal improvements of painting and column wraps. Since the last meeting, the owner has invested in re-engaging us over the past few months to develop an overall master plan approach for improvements across the entire center, which is much more than what we had previously proposed. So this has been a design process of working through many different design iterations, receiving some feedback from staff, and trying to figure out what they can afford as far as the owners to improve the center, and then how to fund these improvements in a phased approach. And before we get any further, the owner's representative, Mr. Tyler Pitapan, is joining us tonight, and just want to let him share a few words.
Yeah, I'm Tyler, by the way. I work for the Beatty Company. So a little history on the center. Our owner's father, Guy Beatty, developed this property in 1992. And it's still in the family. We want to keep it that way. Just need to kind of modernize its architectural appeal. Obviously, being in retail with COVID, we're struggling to keep the center, occupied, and we've taken a few hits on that. So just trying to freshen it up, bring it back to the forefront of the Trolley Square corridor, the Trolley Road corridor, and get our leasing picked up back to 100% to fund these phases 2 and 3 down the road. So phase 1, obviously our first goal to freshen the center up and get it fully leased and push our rents up a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Tyler. Tim, would you remind me, are we allowed to take the wheel and do a shared screen on our side, or does it need to go through you guys?
I think I can give you permission to share.
Okay, I was just thinking that, we've got 41 pages of stuff. I'd like to kind of condense it and just get the highlights, if that's okay with the board.
Yeah, as long as it's the same material and you're not introducing anything new, we can
absolutely.
Yeah, that's fine.
Understood. So I will go ahead and see if I can initiate the screen share on my end. Please let me know if everybody can see my screen at this time.
Looks good over here.
Okay, great. And then I think we may have some new board members since last time we presented this. So I'll just take 1 second to kind of show a preview of the existing conditions and photographs. So at the lower part of the screen here, you can see this is what we're calling building 2. This is the out parcel building. It's really the back of this building, and this is a drive-through lane that kind of comes through. So this is sort of the service side that fronts right against Trolley Road. This is the other side of that facade, more of the parking and kind of retail entry for building 2. And then we've got building 1 up front here that has sort of a somewhat of a yellowish sort of tinge to the stucco, and then a green roof line. Just some close-ups of the existing building. These are some steel columns here. In the previous submittal, we requested the option to sort of wrap these columns and give a little bit more mass to the columns, given the scale of them compared to the overall center, and we were approved for that. This is just a Google aerial of the site. And then what I'll do now is I'll just sort of try to briefly run through the entire master plan approach of overall improvements to the center. And then we'll get into sort of phase 1, what we're really asking for approval for tonight. So this is an existing 3D model. We've got Trolley Road at the bottom of the site and our entry drive to the right, building out parcel number 2, and then building number 1, which is the anchor building. This is an overview sort of master plan bird's eye of the improvements. And so starting with the anchor building, building number 1, we're trying to establish a new color palette for the building. So we've saved the existing brick and sort of established a water table sort of base for the building. And then as we've come up, we've gone to a whitewash on the brick for a small portion. And then we've got 3 different colors we've introduced into the facade here, some different shades of gray. We've proposed to replace the existing green roof with a new sort of blue slate colored roof. And then we're integrating these outdoor dining and retail areas. This was previously approved by TRC back in June. And if we're open with you guys, a lot of this was based on COVID and worried about losing tenants. And so some of this is for dining and some of this is just for retailers who are going to kind of bring their merchandise up here if needed. So we have attached that TRC approval at the back of this set if we need to go back and look at any of the details of that. But essentially, we've got fairly large sort of pedestrian kind of plaza area here. These are 40 by 18 little sort of pocket park or outdoor seating areas, 2 of these. We felt like it was really needed as this facade is somewhat flat and is 330 feet long. So that pretty much captures the improvements to building 1. And then on building 2, as it fronts Trolley Road, again at the bottom of the screen, one of the previous board comments was please provide some screening for this drive-through lane here. So we're looking at integrating in this sort of 130-foot long hedge of ligustrums shown at the bottom of the page. We've added this, the 3rd outdoor patio trellis area here, which is fairly large as well. It's 58 by 12. When we were going through the TRC approval process for these outdoor seating areas, we went ahead and updated our parking count based on the new UDO calculations, and we realized we actually had a little bit of room to do that. So this is sort of a nice cedar trellis outdoor seating area here. And then along this back facade, which again is really the service side of the building, We've integrated some living wall features and some cedar trellis features as well. So that's kind of the overview, and I'll dive into some of the details here now. So at the top of the page, we have the existing building 1, and then we have the proposed improvements at the bottom of the page. This is a close-up that shows how we've relocated this entry drive against the building. We've saved areas for fire trucks and sort of unloading and no parking zones. We did a detailed analysis, which is in the back of the set, of how these seating areas were sort of spaced out to give the 6 feet requirements for COVID if we're dealing with that. We've integrated some new green planters against the building. And this is a little close-up of the new color palette where we have the brick at the base, this whitewash, and then we have 3 tones of gray as you move up the building, and then again the blue, slate blue facade. This is a close-up of the new outdoor trellis area for building 2, which fronts Trolley Road, which is in the background here. So we've got stucco columns, wide flange beams, then supported on top with these cedar joists, and then again integrating some planters on each side. This is at the bottom. You'd see the building 2. This is the retail side or parking side. So we have, again, integrated this new color scheme with certain accents along the cornice line and just certain trim features, and then a simple addition of a hanging trellis sort of at the center of the building mass, and you can see it compared to the existing just above on the page. This is looking from Trolley Road, and again, trying to directly respond to some of the previous board comments of trying to screen this facade and provide a little bit of interest and features along this, given it's the closest building to Trolley Road. And again, you can see the existing sort of service side feel that you have at the top of the page. A little bit of a close-up of the outdoor seating area from the parking side for building 2. And then this is actually, if you were to enter off of Trolley and go down the entry drive to the right side of the property, sort of to the east, then you would pass by the drive-through. So we've added a new accent trellis over the drive-through window. And then we'd like to do something to kind of integrate something that's sort of vernacular from Somerville. You know, the more I talk to Tyler and Susie and realize that Susie's father developed the property and has owned it and wants to retain it. And, you know, as much as they are a bigger brand in different states, this particular center is very meaningful for them. So we're trying to figure out some sort of local mural or something we can do on the wall here that kind of ties it to Somerville a little bit better. We haven't really determined what that artwork might be yet, but at this point we've got sort of a placeholder here. And then just jumping to exterior materials palette, just a really quick palette of all our Sherwin-Williams colors, our stained cedar, steel wide flange for our trellis, and cedar trellis joist on top. And then we have our whitewash brick, and then we have our existing brick base that we're maintaining at the bottom. Then going back to building 1, the anchor building, and this is the new color palette we've established for that. So this concludes the overall sort of master plan improvements. I'll kind of quickly go through, here's some enlargements of the living wall, which is sort of a wide flange with steel inset. But I'll kind of quickly go through what we're, seeking for phase 1 approval tonight, which is fairly simple. And then if we go to these images showing sort of the implementation of 2, or sort of this new palette of grays and whites for the building. And then if I go to an enlargement here, you can sort of see sort of a heavier gray at the top cornice line, and the entablature below gets this softer gray. Then we have the whitewash of the brick here, which we feel like is also going to sort of read like somewhat of a gray, so that some of the brick color comes through. This is the previous approval from the small sort of spindly green columns, just sort of wrapping them with fiber cement to give them some more mass. And then finally, you get to the materials palette for what we're requesting approval for on phase 1. So in essence, that sort of covers everything. I know we have a lot in the set, so we'll open it up to whatever questions or discussions that the board may want to have.
Lossie, this is Chris. I think that was a great job, very succinct. Just for some context, just if any members weren't here, Lossie has presented a lot of the basic tenets of this previously, and we made some comments, and he responded. I think he came back one time already. If not, he's definitely responded to our comments. Given the, I did not see anything for me objectionable. I want to talk about the mural just for a minute. That is a little unusual. But there is a movement within the arts community of Somerville to actually have more murals along existing walls. There's one done at the chamber. There's one done at the parking garage. Brad Mallett's place, name escapes me right now, but Coastal Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the press and Taco Bell even, and people seem to love that bell on Taco Bell Main Street. So I think for me there would be a lot of support for that. Of course, it's got to be tasteful and not, I don't know, something weird. But anyway, there's definitely precedent there. I would support that. And giving the state of retail and restaurants and all that we are seeing right now, I am in support of this project, and I'm in support of approving it quickly. I think they've done a great job. But that being said, looking forward to other comments. Start with you, Candy, if you don't mind. Do you have any immediate comments?
You're muted,
Candy. You're muted.
Here we go.
There you go.
I think it's a great looking project. I really like everything. I don't really like the whitewash brick over the other brick, but that's just me personally. It just looked a little odd to me for some reason. So maybe if we could look at it again, it would look a little better to me. We kind of moved on past it, but that was the only thing that I found that I did not really personally care for the look.
I've agreed with Candy. I don't know why that didn't really set.
Didn't do it. Yeah.
Me right either. But I think the brick should stay the brick. But that would be the only comment that I would make, rather than whitewashing half of it and leaving the other half.
Maybe whitewash it all. Don't just whitewash half of it.
But I like everything.
Lossie, would you mind responding? All right. Sorry, Carolyn. Lossie, would you mind responding to that real quick?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've studied this thing many different ways, and for us, this sort of new palette of adding these accent lines, such as we've sort of better established this kind of colonnade by striking this gray datum across here, and it sort of gives a placeholder for some of this retail signage above. And before, we sort of had these bricks within this sort of stucco element on top that, for me, it just wasn't believable. We have an ephes or synthetic stucco above. And if this whole thing was brick and we actually had a true brick arch colonnade, I think it would be extremely appealing. But we just felt like, go ahead and give it sort of a stucco feel, and then establish sort of a water table or brick base, which we felt was consistent with the ordinance. But we've looked at it a lot of different ways, and we don't want to lose the feel, the texture of the brick, which is why previously we were proposing a painted solid paint brick, and now we're just proposing a whitewash. But that's kind of how we got to this point.
Yeah, and this is Tyler with the ownership. Our process wasn't the brick columns, was to bring the whitewash down to the same elevation of the columns that we're wrapping with the cement fiber board, so it kind of had that uniform water table look from the front, like Lossie mentioned, just to really make it crisp and sharp from the approach from Trolley Road.
All righty, thank you for that. Bill, did you have any comments?
Bravo, Lossie, looks great. Keep it up.
Does look good.
All righty, Mr. Karpus.
Hey, sorry I missed this the first time in August. Got a little tied up back then. I actually like the whitewash brick. I'm sorry. I think it connects the columns with the stucco a lot better than creating such a stark contrast between the face of the stucco with the brick. And so I like the creation of the water table and the whitewash brick. My only comment would be that when when the blue standing seam roof is usually kind of associated with prototypes, but I don't dislike it on this. I would say that might want to consider tying in the coping, the metal coping color with the roof when the time comes, and not have a green coping with blue standing seam metal roof. But everything else I think looks really good.
Yep, this is Tyler again. When we change the roof out, we'll definitely change the coping to match. It would be done, one job.
Okay.
I think that's a great point, Chris. Kind of tied all together with that slate blue on the coping.
Alrighty, Greg, any comments?
Yeah, just kind of similar. I think it's it really is a great project, which is kind of funny when you think about a tired old shopping center and the value of good design in leveraging the value of an aging asset. I mean, it's a great story. And I think you've done a phenomenal job and Trolley Road's an important part of our community. And it is a lot of properties are very tired. And this is just a great, I'm so happy to see investment going in on Trolley Road to bring in, a more active and engaged tenant and customer base. The couple things that, I would throw out there for you to consider, the street lights, parking lot lights, from the old days tend to be either yellow because they were sodium halide, I think, and then they moved to metal halide, and they all look terrible. If you can afford the modern LED parking lot light, you say, oh, it's just parking, but it's really not. It's really part of the customer experience. When you get there and you have a nicely lit parking lot, we did a lot of renovation out at the airport. If you go out to that surface lot, the quality of light just makes you feel alive, and it renders the colors better. So I would put that in some future budgeting if you don't already have that in there. And then the second thing is,
sorry, this is Tyler. We already completed that project back in the fall and early winter this year. So the entire property's been retrofitted to LED parking lot, wall packs, under canopy lights.
And that's going to make your new colors look so much better than they would have otherwise. The other thing is I chide people about, showing photos that have these tired old, partially illuminated company vendor logos. And then your new drawing has these perfectly lit, beautiful signs that fit right between your new reveal lines. Really, if you're going to do that, that's great. But I just think you took some artistic license and, are those signs really going to look as awesome as they do? Or are they going to look like they do on the photograph, which is kind of dull and drab and really, really tired? Or are they nice and bright and beautiful like you're rendering? But that's not here or there. It's just, I'm kind of like, let's be honest about what we're really doing and not like show stuff that you may or may not do. The whitewash brick, you're probably familiar with the, and the name escapes me, the hotel on downtown that used to be the federal office building, and they whitewashed the brick and it's a hotel now.
Nice.
The Dewberry.
Dewberry, yeah. I haven't been in there because I can't afford even to go in the bar. I wouldn't go in the bar now anyhow. But anyhow, that's a story. And if you haven't, Candy, if you haven't seen that building, it really does show that the whitewashing tends to look better than painting the brick. And when you look at the images again, my concern with the existing, which I think they've solved very nicely, is that white against the brick create this horizontal line. Whereas when you introduce the white, it tends to make the building more modular and regular. So I'm a huge fan of what you've done with the columns to make those arches read like arches and going to the ground, and really in a form that's recognizable as an arch, and whether it's a real arch from Rome or it's the arch that's been reinterpreted for 2,000 years, I mean, this is a shopping center, but that looks really good for an arch in a shopping center. So I would, keep an open mind on the brick, and maybe you could send the board some photos of the Dewberry, because that building used to just be an eyesore. And they did a dozen different mock-ups of different colors through the years. And then finally somebody came along and said, I've got it. And they put this whitewash on it. It looks great. I mean, just painting that building made all the difference in the world. So again, I probably have gone on too much, but since I've been mean to some other presenters, I feel like, well, if you're mean to them, you got to be nice when somebody does something great, and hopefully encourage people to come back to the board with, this quality of work. And then it makes the meetings fun, because you get to say, oh, this is really great. I'm really excited about it. So, good job. And I couldn't be happier with seeing this kind of investment and this quality of design going into Trolley Road. And it's good. It's very good.
All righty, very good. I think we heard from everybody. If not, please chime in. Bill, did you went? Yeah, Bill went. Already, they're asking for final approval, I believe.
Yes.
So if someone, I don't know, there were some conditions or there were some concerns, but if someone would like to make a motion pretty explicitly, please do so.
Well, the disagreement on the board was the whitewash of the columns, and I don't want to steamroll anybody. So I think we need to just make sure everybody's comfortable one way or the other with the whitewash columns. Other than that, I think that was the only.
Could we look at building 2? Didn't building 2 have some whitewash on the columns? That's
right. Let's see if I can get you there.
That was the one that really caught me.
Yeah.
That's the one that bothers me. Building 1, it doesn't bother me, but that bothers me. And I'm very familiar with the Dewberry. I know exactly what you're talking about. It looks great, but it's all whitewashed. It is a mix of this.
Right.
Okay. But that's just me. I'm not going to vote against it. It's not enough of a difference to vote against. It was just a comment that I don't really care for it. It's just that I don't care for it. It's personal.
And me as well. And the one thing that you pointed out, it does make the arch look nicer, because it was kind of standing up there by itself on these brick columns, but it does make the arch look better. And I agree with you on that for sure.
I agree too. I think we're fine. I think we were the only 2.
Well, that doesn't mean you're wrong.
No,
just
it's just
minority does not mean you're incorrect.
It's a great project. It's a great project. Big improvement.
And the whitewashing it looks a little more opaque it looks like it's painted in the rendering, whereas a real whitewash won't be. I mean, you can see the brick coming through. So, all right, well, we still have called for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion for final approval.
I'll second.
All right. Kenny second. Okay. Any further discussion? All right, I'm going to roll call. So motion for final approval, Candy?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Chris Carpus?
Yes.
Greg Soika?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right, very good. Looks great, Lottie. I echo Greg's comments. It's very great job.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.
You too. And don't forget to give up control, Lottie.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me do that now. Sorry. There we go. All right,
thanks.
good evening.
And then you too. We have one other item on the agenda, which is UDO discussion, right, Tim?
Yes, that's correct. Give me a second here. It's going slow. I don't have anything prepared. I am sure that all of you heard that Town Council put forth a how do I want to put it? They proposed to repeal the UDO at their last meeting. Jessie is here. She can discuss some of those details a little bit better, and can let if you have questions for us, if you have anything specific that you think is problematic with the UDO, if that you think, if there's something that you like that you'd like to highlight and point out the benefits of it, please, 7 o'clock, but if you have the time and you want to discuss this a little bit further, please let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah, this is Jessie. I just wanted to chime in real quick. In the meeting, I don't know if any of y'all watched it or not, but where they gave first reading to repeal the UDO, they didn't really provide a whole lot of feedback to staff as to what to replace it with, other than to go back to our old ordinances, which are unfortunately from the early 1980s. So we're trying to work towards what to keep and what does need to go. And so we're adding this item to all of our board agendas to get y'all's feedback, because obviously y'all are very familiar with what you do and dealing with commercial development in the town, and we value your opinion. So obviously y'all, those of you who've been on the board did give input when the UDO was developed as well, and now that we've had a little bit over a year to use it, I don't know that I would have gone the route of repealing it in first reading, but it isn't necessarily a bad time to review it and see what's working and maybe what isn't. So any feedback y'all can provide would be appreciated.
Well, I have some, being new to the board, a lot of thoughts and opinions, and it all hinges around, are these guidelines and recommendations that generally apply to most projects, but they're not an absolute? Or is it like the Bible? You can't say, well, I like the Bible, I don't like this part. You got to accept that whole thing. That's the deal. You don't pick and choose. But I'm thinking the UDO is not like the Bible, that you can pick and choose. And you take that guidance and you apply it to your specific project. So if that's the case, then I think it would be a huge mistake to delete guidance. Now, if it's deleting requirements, I think, I'm not sure requirements are helpful, because we're a diverse community, old and new buildings, old and new streets, old and new ways of thinking, old and new economies. And nobody has the judgment or the foresight to say, these are rules, these are absolutes. There's very few places you can go in life where you can find absolutes. And you're not going to find absolutes in a town of Somerville UDO. You're going to find some ideas. So I'm just kind of wondering what the town council is thinking, because it doesn't sound to me like they're thinking. You got to have guidance. You can't just, you got to turn the light on when somebody walks in the room so they can figure things out. But, with no guidance, there's just no way of making, consistent forward progress in the future development of our communities.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
I just wanted to ask, was there one area of the UDO that was the main sticking point that they were wanting to throw it all out, or?
I am still working to find that out. We've had difficulty scheduling meetings with specific council members just because my schedule's been crazy and so, they're busy as well. So it's been kind of difficult getting together with them, a better understanding. But I know, I think one part that just from the minimal conversations I have had, one part that does concern them is I think our nonconformities chapter, which we actually provided a lot more detail on. Our former nonconformities was basically a paragraph, but this we actually have a whole chapter now, and it's not a big chapter, but it's a lot more than we used to have. And I feel that may be part of the issue, but I'm not entirely sure. I know that's something to do with it, but we did build in flexibility with the nonconformity chapter, but you know, so that's something we're certainly looking at there. But other than that, I don't have any, you know, real specifics yet to look at. I mean, there's certain council members that just want to get rid of the whole thing.
Right, but is it for their private personal benefit or the benefit of their family and friends? Or is it because of a deep-seated education and understanding about positive, continuous land development?
I think it's, I honestly think it's just a ideological difference of opinion.
Right, and that we can address. I mean, history shows that the places with the highest land values have the highest restrictions. And you can go out to Carmel, if you can afford it, or La Jolla, or Provincetown, and you'll see the high land values have the highest restrictions. And there's a reason for that, because people bought someplace that's really nice and they don't want to get messed up. And if you go to the places with the fewest restrictions, it's Houston, Texas. I've never met
Rivers Avenue.
Been to Houston and said, what a great place. There's no rules, so everybody does what they want, and has created this wonderful environment. And, you know, people can think of whatever they want, but at some point they have to look at reality in real examples in real cities, and what ordinances do to help the overall aesthetic nature of the communities. There's a direct correlation. And if they want to just close their eyes to that reality, I think that's a different issue.
And to what you spoke to
Jesse,
at first.
can I just comment
yeah,
on
go ahead, Candy.
Okay. I've had a lot of people discuss this back and forth with me, and people that own properties, okay? And they have a great concern that it doesn't work well for existing properties that are trying to make changes, and in particular, smaller properties. And in comment to what Greg said, is this like the Bible where you have to do it exactly as it reads? Or is it just ideas to help make things better? And the other comment I've heard is that it is being enforced by the letter. There's no flexibility. You must do exactly as the UDO requires. And that doesn't go well. That's the problem we've got.
Well, and I think part of that is a false reality, because y'all can,
what I hear.
well, because y'all can make exceptions to anything in chapter 4.
But the consumer,
y'all can make exceptions to
the planning
anything.
department should not have to deal with it. They ought to have flexibility at that point, not concrete, I'm going to enforce it exactly as the way it reads.
And I don't feel we do that either, Candy. I really don't.
Well, there are people in the community that feel that way.
But have they talked to us about it? Have they actually come in and spoken to myself or Jesse?
What I've heard
or
is there's
somebody
no
else?
talking, is just you do it.
And Candy, you know that's not how we work. So
Hey, that's
I'm
that's
trying
as
to
far
share
away
with
from
you
my
what I
philosophy.
hear, okay? I have to tell you, that's what I hear.
Yeah.
So if there's that perception, that's causing some of the problem, okay? Now, I don't know. I haven't talked to any council members about it. I'm just talking to people on the street, and I hear that it's not well received. So
well, and that
well,
those people don't talk to us is the problem. Like I've talked to all the folks we work with on a regular basis tell us how flexible we are, that we work with them. We do. So that's that's why we don't know that they're concerns, because they don't tell us. How can we fix something if we're not aware of what the issue is?
I've worked with everybody. I've worked with every municipality in this area. I'm sure Greg has, and Bill, and people in our trade, Chris Carpus. And the town of Somerville has the most respectful staff and that's around, and they try to be helpful. Now we're in the business, so we understand zoning, and we understand codes, and we understand regulations and all that. So we know how to, what am I trying to say? We know how to identify the rules and how to work with them, right? But I think that zoning probably intimidates a lot of people, or they don't understand it, or they hear rumors on the street. Hey, Candy, I hear some of the same things too, so I'm not necessarily.
I know you hear it.
Pushing back. I hear it, yeah. And I've heard the same thing about design review board. Oh, you got to do what they say, and stuff like that. So, don't we? But as far as staff goes, staff is awesome. To a person, every one of them, better than anyone else in Charleston.
I know our staff is very helpful, but I think there has been an attitude of the UDO must be enforced the way it reads. Tonight is the first meeting I've ever heard that there's some flexibility to the UDO, and if you don't fall within it, it's okay. We'll make that work. I've never heard that before on a meeting. Ever.
And I would agree.
Everybody we talk to, we tell them that in terms of everything in chapter 4.
Meetings, so.
Everything we do, Kenny. In the staff report, it says, the board has the authority to grant exceptions to this. Everything in chapter 4 you do.
What has the person applying heard before they come to us?
We tell them that. We say ask for what you want, because the board has the authority to grant those exceptions. If you explain to them your design intent and why you're doing it, anybody who bothers to talk to us, we tell them that.
And that's the thing, is they don't come in and say, this is the reason why I want to do it this way. I have looked at this, I've looked at that. All these things throughout town have inspired me to produce something that looks like this, and it doesn't necessarily match. And they're not asking for the permission. We tell them that they can do that. And we've highlighted that in our staff reports. And maybe we haven't stressed it strongly enough.
Well, maybe
since we've heard that now, that there is this perception that we're being inflexible on it, it's there. And it's built into the ordinance intentionally to allow you guys who have been appointed by the town council to provide that flexibility and allow for these changes to be made. And if you talk to us from the start and get to us early, we can highlight these areas that they will need permission to get modifications and waivers for these requirements. But these are really base level guidelines that are trying to raise the floor for development, not, elevate it beyond what's going to come here.
I would have to agree with Candy a little bit. I agree with all of you. That's the problem. I agree with Candy a little bit in that the way the ordinance is written, it looks strict. Very strict. Jesse, I talk to you several times a week. Tim, same with you. And I know that there's some flexibility in there, but y'all had to tell me probably 10 times, to be honest, because it's the way the information within the UDO is presented, that flexibility clause isn't obvious. And I think a great example, and Jesse, I've talked about this a little bit, but a great example is the building that went in across from Dennis Ashley's office.
Yep.
Remember, on Magnolia Street. And they went with a flat roof, brick wall right up on the road. And I said from the beginning, this is not appropriate. But the architect, I can't remember his name, but the applicant,
UDO?
he said, this is what I have to do on the UDO. But he was incorrect. He really was, because he used the wrong precedent. He could have gone with more residential nature, sloped buildings, that sort of thing. but I think it's, and he's an architect. He should know better. He should know about that flexibility. So I think this is not necessarily a staff issue. It's the way the UDO is written.
It is.
That flexibility is not obvious. And the images, and Jesse and I talked about this briefly, but the images and the precedents used in the UDO all show flat roofs, 1 or 2 story buildings like Short Central or the Main Street. And so you get this perception that every building you have to do has to have a flat roof, and it's going to be just
awful.
A brick wall all the way down Magnolia. And that's not true, but that's the story that's being told.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. That is correct. So it is a communication thing, not necessarily a staff thing, a communication thing, which makes me think that when it was first put in place, people didn't approve it then. They're not approving it now because they don't like that they're being told to do things with no flexibility. They're not as schooled as a Chris Campo or a Greg Soka or Chris Karpus. They're just out there trying to make their property look better, and they feel like their hands have been tied.
Yeah, well, that's the ultimate, it's the ultimate battle of our country has been the balance between individual property rights, which people have died for.
Important.
People have died for.
Yeah.
For our whole history. They've died to protect their land, yet trying to balance the good of the community, which we're all talking about since we were little kids. Go to church, love your neighbor. And there's that balance, which puts us at a potential conflict. But I think people have to just come to the reality of, yes, land rights are critical. They're one of the highest priorities we place as a society, but we also respect our communities and our neighbors. And how do you navigate that balance? If you go into Nexton, I don't think there's a lot of balance there. It's about the good of the community. But if you're in downtown Somerville and a house or a property's been some family for 100 years, it's not the same. They're two different customers. And the person with the ownership in downtown Somerville does not have the potential to create architectural crimes like a big parcel on Trolley Road has the potential to do. And, I'd like to think if you could get the right people in the right room and talk about the balance between what's good for all of us in terms of Somerville being charming and a delightful place to work, and then compare it to some places that aren't. And how do you create that balance between the individual and the community? And that should be an ongoing open discussion. I had a friend, he said, why do I need a building permit to build my house? It's my house. I own the house. If I make a mistake, it's my problem. I said, no, it's really not, because if you make a mistake and get electrocuted, eventually I'm going to end up paying a part of your hospital bill. And when you go and sell that house, the buyer's not going to know it, and he's going to end up, buying this catastrophe. That's why we have building codes, to protect ourselves from ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, I think the pushback is in infill development mostly, particularly if it's kind of closer into town.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're getting, and I've talked to developer friends about this, I don't think they're getting pushback on larger developments. Maybe it's over 5 acres, anything along Maple Street, that kind of, or what's the Tillman Boulevard or Tillman Street now, that's kind of the frontage road along I-26.
Millhouse Drive.
I don't think you're gonna have Millhouse Drive. That's right, Tillman Millhouse. Millhouse.
New name.
Call him by his first name. Anyway, I don't think you're getting pushback from where you're going to put a new hotel, or where you're going to, put, I don't know, some big new national use. But where you're getting pushback is from those smaller little infill things. So if we have to find something we can all agree on and kind of to keep this moving forward, maybe that's kind of the key, is you have it in certain areas. And I don't know how this is kind of policed, but if it's in town, like the town core, maybe the DRB catches the architectural crimes, so to speak. But the go ahead.
I was gonna say, and I mean, the folks who have asked us about it, we pointed out, and we've pointed it out for now that we do TRC, folks get, started on the process sooner with staff than previously.
Yeah.
But we have built-in infill things, guidelines that are taken into account where if it's an infill piece, you don't have to meet the build 2 lines. You can meet the setback that's along the road. That's the average setback along the road.
But
that hasn't been what they've been told, though.
Jesse, I hate to interrupt.
I don't know who they is. That's the problem.
You just think about through the year, what's been happening in the town. Has everybody been given the opportunity to have flexibility or not? Okay, and maybe they they misunderstand, just as Chris says. But there just are people that feel like it's too restrictive, and that's the bottom line. And I don't know if we'll ever get past that. So,
is there an appeals process? Because in Charleston, there's
always a variance process if some, and we've had plenty of people still requesting variances, and anytime someone has come to us with something that they feel just doesn't work and isn't applicable to the town, and we've done like 17 amendments. I mean, we're willing to make changes if it turns out that things don't work. So that's what what I'm not understanding is, who is this that it's not working for? Like we haven't heard that from anybody.
There's just a lot of discussion about it.
And we also haven't had that many applicants.
Well,
we
all know
I'm not
that
sure who it's coming from.
we all know how rumors work, and rumors may not be based on truth, and it gets told over and over and over, or then your neighbor, and it just spreads around. But I will say there's I don't know how to get past that. But there's 2 applicants I can think of since the UDO was adopted. One was across the street from Dennis Ashley, and he, these are design professionals. They misunderstood the ordinance. And then the one tonight on the townhomes, they misunderstood it. And Chris McGaldy said it. He said, we thought the build 2 line, because a build 2 line means you have to build to that line. It's not, oh, well, you can slide it back. So
exactly right.
And so he said in the meeting, oh, well, I didn't realize we could slide it back, so we'll absolutely do that. Mm-hmm. So again, I think and I'll have to study it a little bit harder, but I think it's the way the information is presented. And again, this is not at staff. Maybe it's just the way it's technically written. There's the build 2, to me, Greg, Chris, Bill, a build 2 line is a build 2 line. That's the rule. So maybe it's the wording needs to be different. I'm not sure.
Well, again, to rewrite something that's already written is an arduous attempt. Oh, yeah. It would be better it would be better and easier to just insert a page at the table of contents and say the purpose and the intent of the guidelines is this. It is not that. And I think if there was a clarification, and there's probably a legal name for that, you just put in and say, what's the purpose of this document? And does that exist? Or is it just do this? You got to tell them, why did we do this? Why was this done in the first place? Mm-hmm. And what is the intent? Do people understand what the goal is? The goal is to make Somerville better, more livable.
Well, I'll tell you,
more cohesive.
The DRB needs teeth, and or not just the DRB, but the whole town, because
we do.
Let me tell you, we get calls from national developers every day, from Chicago, from New York, from whatever, that are all coming to this area, and they do need some guidelines. And I think going back to the way we did it 5 or 10 years ago is a mistake. So the UDO has critical importance. And there is about to be we think we've seen development in the past. There's going to be so much development coming to Somerville over the next 5 years. It's very, very critical that we keep this in some capacity.
Yeah. When I was a little kid, My mom always had these crazy sayings, and when I was little, she said, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." And the time my sister was the baby, and she was like, "One." I said, "I would never throw my sister away," and I didn't understand what that meant. But now as an adult, I use that saying all the time. Just because there's a problem, don't chuck the whole thing. Fix it. You have a car problem with your Mercedes, or you're just going to throw the car away? No, you're not. You've got a huge investment in that thing, and it's really not that big of a deal to go get the Mercedes fixed.
Yeah, well, and I think there may also be a misconception that we somehow made it more difficult for an individual to build their own home. We honestly have not. That process has not changed one iota. That is exactly the same as it previously was. The design guidelines don't apply to individual homes. If it's less than 5 units, it doesn't apply. That process is exactly the same as it was previously. That hasn't changed at all. And I think that is a very common misconception. We did not change that process.
Jesse, was there not something about fencing around trees for individual homes?
We required fencing around trees previously.
You required fencing, but not chain link fencing.
But it now reads where it can
way too much on. Okay.
Well, honestly, the reason for that is because if you use orange plastic fencing, it doesn't do a thing.
Well, that doesn't matter.
Well, so you're saving trees so that they then die a year later because you run over them multiple times.
But I'll tell you, City of Charleston requires chain link fencing, and it's needed. I don't have it. I have no sympathy.
That is a change. The UDO, I believe, says you must use chain link fencing, or the staff is interpreting it that way, and that
it doesn't anymore.
Okay.
It allows whatever's approved by staff, which we generally allow them.
This is a
problem. We allow them to use chain link fencing or 2x4s. It needs to be something sturdy that's going to hold up a little bit better to equipment than a flimsy plastic fence. Otherwise, there's really no point in protecting the trees at all. And that's something that we made that amendment so that we gave people another option if they didn't want to use chain link fencing. Now, of course, according to our arborist, most people are choosing the chain link because wood's so expensive nowadays that they don't want to spend the money on the 2x4s. So, but that's something that we actually started doing prior to the UDO adoption. We changed our policy because our previous ordinance said it had to be a sturdy fencing. And so we changed, we didn't allow the orange fencing anymore previous to the adoption of the UDO. So that's not it was in the UDO, but that's something
the exception is it's part of the UDO, and it's little things like this that make a difference because they think it's part of the UDO, so therefore they don't like the UDO. It isn't that they don't just like that part. It mushrooms into they don't like any of it. And then they all talk about it and they all get upset. And just like Chris said, it's all just grows and grows and grows. So, you ask, I'm telling you, this is what's going on.
I appreciate the frank information. I'm in no way taking offense, Candy. So please don't take it that way. I'm not. I appreciate the information.
You and Tim, and I think the whole staff does a great job, but the UDO has been a little irritant out there, and we've got to somehow turn around the irritant, or it's going to continue to be a problem.
And I think it's the misconception that everything they're required to do was something they didn't have to do prior to the UDO. It just changed because the UDO now is in effect, and that's honestly on single family residential. Less than 5 lots, that is not the case. We really changed almost nothing.
Yeah, we just wrote down what the process actually was. It was prior to it, we didn't actually have that list of steps that they all went through before. And now it's just there and they go, oh my God, I am actually doing that. And that's what they did before. We just made sure that it's written down so that it's clear for everybody.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You got it. You asked, you got it. Okay.
Oh no, that's what the point of the discussion is we need to hear it, because as we said earlier, people aren't coming and talking to us. They're not talking to me and saying, I don't have this flexibility, what's happening? They're not going to Jesse and saying, hey, the DRB and Tim, they're not providing any flexibility in this. They're saying this is how it has to be, and that's it. So if it's something that is not being communicated properly on our end, we need to know that we have to change how we're doing it, because both Jesse and I spent a lot of time, and I know Jesse spent more time than I did on it, and the whole staff, the town council, all of the boards, the number of hours that we put into designing this document to help preserve and protect the town and create, a level playing field for the development and developers. It's just, we need to know that how to do it better, and we want to continue to get better, and if they don't talk to us, we can't change anything.
I would say one thing you can do, and I welcome you to retort. Welcome your retort, I suppose. Make it mandatory that they have a pre-application meeting with town staff. I'm talking applicants with, typically new development, a pre-application meeting, because what happens so much is people don't call you, they don't talk to you. Instead, they just submit something and it's wrong. And then a lot of times the DRB gets, I think, blamed, when in reality, the applicant didn't do their due diligence early, and they should have met with staff and y'all could have guided them. So if you could make that mandatory, a pre-app, that would help.
Yeah, we talked to Chris, you and I talked about that a little bit, and we do have the pre-app mandatory for DRB submittal now, but what's mandatory is the conceptual site plan, not necessarily the architectural elevations. So I know one thing you and I talked about is trying to make at least some sort of design intent, if not the exact elevations, at least your design intent mandatory as well, to give y'all more of a chance to really concentrate on the details, rather than having to basically completely tell people, well, do you actually have any design intent? Like what were you trying to do here? If we require that at the pre-application meeting, we can go ahead and let them know, well, you're going to need to have a design intent. What context are you designing this within? What are you trying to achieve? That type of thing, so that when they get to y'all, they have that already, and you're not trying to pull that out of them and figure out what that is. When y'all are in the meeting, y'all are actually able to concentrate on the details, like you did with the Trolley Road one, where you concentrated on the whitewash, or little things like that are easy to talk about and discuss. And a meeting then doesn't last 3 hours. When it has 5 agenda items, it lasts an hour and a half. So I mean, that's certainly something we can change in terms of the process, really without making necessarily a change to the ordinance at all.
That's right.
Because it already requires a pre-application meeting. We just, for us, we were just concentrating on the site. But for a DRB pre-application, I think y'all are right. I think they do need some type of architecture before they go to y'all. So.
Yeah. And one other thing with that is, and I do this because it was one of the tenets of the original DRB language, is how does this relate to Somerville? What makes this unique to Somerville instead of Phoenix? And I've asked that, I don't know how many times. And that, I asked the applicant, what's your design intent? Tell me your story. I have probably gotten a well-articulated answer one time. And it's kind of sad. It really is, because, they say, well, we're making it we're doing, I don't know, we got windows here and walls there. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I'm laughing inside in a way. I'm really not, but it's like, come on, folks. I mean, tell your story. And maybe at this pre-app, you can emphasize that the DRB wants you to tell your story and to say how it relates to Somerville and to defend it. And if you can say, well, we saw this detail, the brick arch, we saw it because it's over the church right there on Main Street near my office. If they can tell their story and how it relates to Somerville, and there was a little bit of that tonight, I think either Greg or Carcass made a point, I can't remember it now, but that goes a long way, and our meeting would get quicker, because like the school, we've told them 3 times what we wanted them to do. And they just don't want to listen.
I know.
Right, they don't want to listen. You know, tell your story. I've asked the architect 3 times, what's your story? So anyway, I'm sorry for the rant, but
Chris,
anyway, if you kind of could do that in the pre-app, maybe that would help. Go ahead, Candy.
Chris, we've had a lot of discussion about how does that fit in Somerville? And in the past, we've been very succinct about not all areas of Somerville are the same. So you're not going to get the same story to every area. And I think that's confusing to people, because when you say that, they think downtown, Old Town Somerville, and they're out on Bacon's Bridge Road or Trolley Road or Ladson Road, and that changes it. Okay, so that's a hard question. We've got to remember we have distinct sections of Somerville, and we're not going to get front porches with rockers every place. So,
Right.
And
well,
Candy,
that's a
one
great
thing
point.
Tim and I was going to say, one thing Tim and I discussed was the possibility of having a workshop with y'all and council members to talk about what the design intent is or the context is for the different areas of town. So y'all have a better understanding of where council members are with that, and vice versa, so that when folks do come in different areas of town, you know, the DRB already has, you know, a better understanding of what that area of town, what the vision is for that area of town. And, you know, and staff, you know, understands that from y'all's workshop and can discuss that with the applicant prior to the DRB meeting as well. So that's something to talk to Rebecca about. And she also thinks that would be a great idea if we can get council on board to do that. I think that would really help y'all be more effective as well.
And Candy, Magnolia Street near Bart Sabine's office is completely different from Millhouse Boulevard or, you know, somewhere else.
Drive.
You're muted, Candy.
you're right. There are all these differences, and we've just got to be flexible and understand there are these differences. But that really plays into what Jesse's talking about, for them to state what it is they're trying to accomplish. What is their goal here, and how do they feel about this? And if they could come in and tell us some things, that does help us. And we don't have to ask the question that Chris asked, but we can see, is that fitting in with the area they're in, you know? So I think it'll be helpful. So.
All right. Well, it's closing in on 20 to 8. Is there any, and we could stay all night, but
no.
Are there any other?
Go.
Yeah, please.
Are
there any burning
coming in here?
Yeah. Are there any burning?
No, the only thing I would,
well,
the other thing I would throw in is that, you know, I think this was a good discussion, but the advantage, I'm a terrible tennis player, but, you know, there's an advantage, you know, the town council has a clear advantage, not us. And if they've got their mindset, if they're even thinking about, you know, tossing the UDO, we can't just sit around. You know, if we think it's good, then I think there does have to be a plan to say, you know, can we get an audience somehow, or certain members of the group trying to have a rational discussion, and kind of win over some council people, because in the end they're, you know, they've got the advantage. They hold all the cards, so to speak, in terms of ordinances, and that's the group that has to be, you know, not wined and dined, but just talked to and understood a little better. And, And hopefully they can be persuaded to look at things maybe differently. If they're hearing from their brother-in-law, every Friday night about, this and that, they're going to pay more attention to that than, so I think it's the personal connections. Who has personal connections with the council members, and will they, entertain a discussion on what's going on?
I think it's what you said earlier also. If we slip a page into the UDO that says, this is guidelines, instead of, it has to be this way. I think that's what's critical.
I agree.
Because it would be
Bill,
that way too.
I understand, Kara. Bill, do you have any comments? I know you work with it within it as well.
I totally hated the UDO when I first read it, and more working with it over the year's time, I don't mind it now because I've gotten used to going through the 500 pages or whatever it is. It's very voluminous.
317, but yes, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And I've gone through it. And the more I've gone through it, and the more I've learned about it, the better it is to work with. We got to have an ordinance that's mandated by law. They don't propose to go out and hire another group of consultants and write yours. They want to re-adopt the old ordinance or what?
That was the first reading, was just to go back to the old ordinance.
Yeah. Well, I don't even have any problem if they do that.
Yeah. Jesse, they might have to do that so we can get the UDO to read right, so that people understand it. All of the people understand it, not just have the technical knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the problem is if you go back and then go back again, then that's a whole bunch of uncertainty for folks, and you're changing the rules over and over again. Not that the rules changed that much with the two, but as Greg pointed out, the UDO provides a whole lot more guidance for y'all, particularly on design and that sort of thing, and also on how things are done. Like it as Tim pointed out, we always had these steps in place as that this is what you have to do. It just wasn't written down. So one reason why the UDO is longer is because we added that chapter. Chapter 13 is really just how you do things. That's all that is this is how you do this. This is how you do that. This is what's required. If you need to do this, it's it doesn't really necessarily add a whole much more to the process. It was really just writing down what we already did, what people already had to do, and just putting it in writing so that they didn't have to, not everybody had to, not every engineering firm had to call and say, so how does this work? What do I need if I'm doing this? They could actually go to that chapter and find it. So it's, yes, for the average person, they're still going to need to call us and figure out, what they need to do. And we're happy to do that. That's, honestly, what we spend most of our days doing. But it's, it's easier to be able to be like, well, particularly if we're busy and we can't find a time to meet with someone, be like, hey, look at chapter so-and-so, this section that kind of explains it. Once you have a chance to look at that, if you still have questions, give me a call. That type of thing. I do that particularly with certain things. I do that all the time. Also, like someone's like, is this use allowed? I'm like, oh, here's our use chart, because it's so much easier to read than our old ordinance in terms of what's allowed. I'm like, here's our use chart. Take a look at it. This gives you all the uses that are allowed in that district. If you have any questions, let us know after taking a look at it. And then they usually do call back and we discuss it and that sort of thing. And it's fine. Again, that's what we're here for. But it's just, in some ways, people, for some reason, I think council, for some reason, thinks our old ordinance is easier to use, just because that's what they were used to all the time. But it's a whole lot harder to read. And it's a whole lot harder to understand how it works. If you're trying to do something, like if you're trying to do an apartment in B3 in our old ordinance, you have to go back to the R6 regulations. Like you don't use the B3 regulations. It's a really, it's hard for folks to understand how that works. So we tried to, the idea behind the UD was to fix all those issues we had with the old ordinance that we kept hearing from folks like, I don't understand how this works. Why do you do this? Why do we have to do that? And actually add more of that flexibility in was a whole lot of doing that, and also providing more guidance and particularly for y'all, and then adding in the actual, and then of course we added the mixed use districts, but those are only in certain locations that we felt it was key to have that type of allowance in. So I mean, and again, I've told other folks, if we go back to the old ordinance, we go back to the old ordinance. I mean, I worked with it for 12 years. I can certainly work under the old ordinance. That's not the issue. It's just, as Greg pointed out, I don't think it moves us forward. I think it just keeps us in the same place we were. And I want the town to move forward, to continue to improve, and I don't think the old ordinance does that. So.
Well, in the old ordinance, last thing I'll say for the night.
Yeah, Jesse, thanks for your input. That was
Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Last thing I'll say for the night. It'll be very quick. The old ordinance allowed Weathers Apartments to be built like it is. The new ordinance would encourage, the Aldi, the car wash, and the whatever. The new ordinance would encourage buildings up on the front, completing the street, better architecture. It would be that would look a lot different. And the old ordinance also allowed the doggy hotel to go in across from the chamber. And there's a whole lot of people that were not in favor of that, and the UDO would have fixed that. So, okay, well, I think that's all I'm going to offer tonight.
All right.
And again, thank y'all for your frank discussion. We appreciate it, and please, we certainly don't take offense at any of it. We want to know how you truly feel, so that's helpful.
And if somebody has questions, tell them to call us.
Tell them to call you.
We need to
Right.
we need to say the UDO, and if we need to slip sheet it in there that this is flexible, then do it.
Yeah, it may be just something where we need to highlight that more, because it's built in there, but yeah, it's not exactly obvious. So.
Good night.
All right. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Motion for adjournment. Motion to adjourn.
All right, everybody vote.
Yes.
Everybody vote by signing off.
Yes.
Bye.
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 Thank y'all.
Good night.
Good night.